I'm in.
You're in.
All right, everybody good?
Mhm.
Good evening, everyone. It is 5:03. This is the regular board meeting for the Pickerington Local School Board, Board of Education, September 13th, 2021. Mr. Jenkins, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Niekamp.
Here.
Mrs. Olszewski.
Here.
Mr. Christoph.
Here.
Mr. Lopez.
Here.
Mrs. Sanders.
Here.
If everyone can please stand, follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a short moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have a motion and a second for approval of the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Mr. Jenkins, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Christoph.
Yes.
Mrs. Sanders.
Yes.
Mr. Lopez.
Yes.
Mrs. Olszewski.
Yes.
Mrs. Niekamp.
Yes.
The next section is for public participation. I'm just going to take these in the order that they were submitted. The first individual is Jamie McElwain to speak about professional development of our teachers.
Good evening. Jamie McElwain, 624 Manchester Circle North, Pickerington, obviously. Do you know anything else?
No, just your address and then you're free to start.
And
She
I'm sorry,
gave it.
address. I just gave my address. She
Okay,
gave-
I'm sorry, it's tough to hear.
Oh, well, probably because I'm very super short, so there's that. Jamie McElwain, 624 Manchester Circle North, Pickerington.
Thank you.
Okay. Last time I spoke about my daughter, Amy, about her health and her IP. I never mentioned her skin color. If I would it have mattered? Would the scenarios I mentioned have been different? How about the outcomes? CRT says yes. What do you think the definition of CRT is? My definition is a divisive discourse that pits people of color against white people. Does that sound like unity to you? Does it sound like the definition of diversity? Diversity means to involve all people from different backgrounds. The school has been asked many times if they are teaching CRT, and the answer is no. I recently been contacted by concerned teachers in the district who have a different response. Teachers are currently being trained by Dr. Howard, and some of the trainings are called Love and Knowledge or Perspective and Understanding. Examples are, if a brown-skinned student is loud in class, if a brown-skinned student is loud in class, it's okay because it's their culture and that's how they are raised in church. It talks about how white people can be ignorant, but they mean well. One of the teachers wonder why they're only talking about white and black cultures and not other races. Another says CRT is divisive and a political action. If we can talk about CRT, we can talk about God. Another asks, why are they getting punished for things that that happened before they were born? I only gave a couple of examples today, but I'm super nervous today for some reason. I only gave a couple examples today, but I assure you CRT is alive and well in Pickerington. CRT is insulting to the Black community and blended families. And where does it leave me, being a white mother to a brown-skinned child? My daughter's IEP does not define her. My daughter's asthma does not define her. And the color of her skin, which is brown, does not define her. If we want to bring more education to the community, first, let's not do it just for once a month. How many of you know these names? Claudette Colvin, who is actually the first African-American woman to give up her seat on the bus, not Rosa Parks. How about Bessie Coleman, first African-American woman pilot? I could name so many more, and no one knows who these African-American people are. There's another way besides CRT to teach us about African-American culture and diversity. Another name you may not know, Noah Lair. On Thursday night, the 8th grader from Ridgeview had to come to an adult social media group as a last resort for a cry for help for bullying. He had gone to teachers, principals, and staff and gotten nowhere. Per his mother, this isn't the first time. Per his mother, he was told to kill himself and draw on himself with knives. Per his mother, a teacher told him boys will be boys. This Pickerington is unacceptable. This school's priorities are so messed up right now. Example, a child gets bullied for weeks. The child gets fed up and fights back. The child gets suspended. Nothing happens to the other child because Pickerington says they have a zero tolerance policy. Where was that zero tolerance policy for weeks when that child was being bullied? Before fists start flying, the zero tolerance policy should start. My ask today, stop lying to the parents. A turd covered in sprinkles and confetti is still a turd, and CRT called love and knowledge is still CRT. Number 2, let us ask Dr. Howard questions. We understand you don't have answers to our questions. Number 3, change your policies for bullying before one of us has to bury a child. It's called preventative measures. The last thing I have to say is for the parents watching at home and here, do your research before you vote in November. There are candidates here who are claimed to be Christians and for CRT. I remember a song I sang in Bible school. Red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in his sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. God is not for division, and CRT does not belong in our schools.
Thank you. The next individual we have is Stephanie Dean to talk about mandates.
Hi, my name's Stephanie Dean. Sorry, I'm a little taller. I live at 615 Pickerington Hills Drive. School board and Dr. Briggs, you have a job to do. That is to make a collective decision to make the best choices for our district. I can share with you about my child, but my child is no more important than any other child in PLSD. That's why it should be left up to the parents and not Dr. Briggs to make mask mandates. From my understanding, Pickerington Local School District follows the recommendations of Franklin County Health Department. However, PLSD has a statement from the Fairfield Health Department on the COVID dashboard. This tells me that we are picking and choosing the guidelines that we are following. Over 66% of the schools in Fairfield County do not have any kind of mask mandates. This includes Pickerington, that does have a mask mandate, and the other percent. COVID is a virus. That's what it is, just like the flu, common cold, and RSV. Viruses are made of nanoparticles. Masks protect you from macroparticles. The masks that people are wearing are not protecting them from anything. They are only making themselves feel better. COVID has a 99.8% survival rate in children. You have never mandated masks for a virus before, so why are you trying to protect children and staff from the dreaded quarantine? It's our decision as parents if we want to protect them from that, not yours. Studies have proven that masks are physically, mentally, and emotionally harmful to children. A quote from the World Health Organization: children should follow the same principles as adults for wearing a mask. This includes cleaning your hands for at least 20 seconds if using alcohol-based rub, or at least 40 seconds if using soap and water, before putting on the mask. Mask should make sure the mask is the right size to cover the nose, the mouth, and the chin. Children should be taught how to wear a mask properly, including not touching the front of the mask and not pulling it under their chin into their mouth. They should store the mask in a container and not share it with others. I challenge you as the board and Superintendent Dr. Briggs to walk into one of the elementaries in PLSD and observe if any of that is being done. It's not. The reality of it is it never will be done. Why, Dr. Briggs, are you mandating masks if you can't justify if it's being done correctly? Lastly, I'll leave you with this. Don't send me an email about contract tracing that starts out by saying, quote, "Thank you for entrusting the health and wellness of our children to PLSD." Get this straight. Myself and most of these parents in here are entrusting the health and wellness of our children to God, ourselves as parents, and the pediatricians that we've handpicked. We are only entrusting PLSD with the education of our children, and frankly, we're all starting to question that.
Thank you. The next individual is Whitney Gilmer for mask mandates and contact tracing.
Whitney Gilmer, 12150 Woodrow Lane. Do I just go ahead?
Sure.
Okay. Board members and Dr. Briggs, I do believe some of you truly want the best for our kids and that you believe your medical mandates are in their best interest, and I thank you for that. However, according to Article 1, Section 21 in the Bill of Rights in the Constitution of the State of Ohio, I get to choose what is best for my kids' health care and not you. PLSD leaders, your mandates are breaking the law as defined by this article. Article 1, Section 21 protects our rights to make healthcare choices for our kids without penalties. PLSD is mandating that children comply with your healthcare protocols, and they are compelling families to participate in this system by levying penalties if we don't comply. Some parents choose to follow these health mandates because they've determined that's what's best for their children and their family, and I support them 100%, and I champion their choice in that. But for us parents who would choose differently for our children, we can make that choice right now because the Bill of Rights of the Constitution of the State of Ohio says that we can. I'm asserting my rights under Article 1, Section 21 today for my children, and other families are prepared to do the same. The schools will be receiving Article 1, Section 1 of the Ohio Constitution Bill of Rights from me, along with a written statement in writing that PLSD is to stop masking and contact tracing my children immediately per my rights in the Ohio Constitution Bill of Rights, Article 1, Section 21. Other parents will be joining in this, and I'm calling parents to take action. We have our state constitution behind us. No Ohio code can circumvent the state of Ohio's constitution. Board members, I'm going to read to you from the oath of office for a school board member in the state of Ohio. Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the state of Ohio and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties to the best of your ability and in accordance with the laws? You all said I do, but you have failed. You have acted in opposition to the Constitution of the state of Ohio. You have not acted impartially toward the law as you promised. Instead, you either used money or you used your personal definition of health and safety to justify stripping us parents of our rights. You've broken the law. I call on you to immediately make masks optional in all grades and start gathering consent for contact tracing from parents who do want their kids to participate. If this means you need to give some money back to the government, give it back. Our healthcare choices are not for sale as parents. If any of you can't keep your oath to uphold the Constitution and act impartially toward the law, I don't think you belong on the school board, per your own oath. Thank you.
Thank you. The next individual we have is Ryan Jerome to talk about student safety.
Ryan Jerome, 535 Harrogate Square. Good evening. I'm here tonight to continue to speak out against any COVID-related mandates in our school district, specifically the use of masks on our children. There is absolutely no data available to support long-term mask wearing for children. None. Because no study has ever been done. With no data available, we could very well be causing more harm to our children. For example, if we are to believe that a piece of cloth can prevent a virus from entering our body, then we must also believe that it can prevent commensal bacteria from doing the same. What's commensal bacteria? It's bacteria that enters the body through the nose and mouth, settles in the stomach and intestines. One of the most important functions of commensal bacteria is boosting our immune system. Commensal bacteria is also vital in fighting against stomach viruses such as norovirus and rotavirus, as well as viruses that attack the lungs like influenza. Throw in increased sanitation and disinfecting practices, as well as social distancing and loads of hand sanitizer, we are already creating a sterile and germ-free environment, which might sound great on paper, but in reality can lead to poorly developed immune systems in our children. Don't believe me? This year, after 18 months of mask wearing, we have already seen increased cases of RSV in children in August, when it typically shows up in the winter. Are COVID cases rising in children due to a variant, or is it because we've weakened their immune system since early 2020? I think it's a fair question to ask. What other illnesses are we going to see an increase of due to forced mask wearing? Remove the mask mandate and allow parents to decide what's best for our children. Thank you.
Thank you. The next individual we have is Daryl Baker to speak about community use of school facilities.
Good evening to the board. Appreciate you guys giving us a few minutes to talk this evening. I just want to pose some questions to you in regards to use of school facilities in the community. Recently, our church, Destiny Ministries, was looking to do an outreach in the community. We contacted the local school that we've been trying to utilize, and we found ourselves week after week reaching out without a response. This triggered something in me because about 10 or 15 years ago when my kids were in school, the same thing happened when we were trying to do something at Pickering Central. At that time, my company, Abbott Laboratories, had allowed me to create a mentoring program that we tried to do with the schools that they were going to fund. I was going to use my time, bringing experts in. And I found from the time we submitted the request in the fall, we didn't get a reply until February, when they finally told us that no, we couldn't bring it into the schools. And so recently I found myself going through that same feeling of, it seems that if we're not a PYAA sport or something like that, there seems to be roadblocks for people in the community who want to do things in the community. For example, what we're looking to do is a fall community fest. We want to do something up at Tucson Elementary where we could be a blessing to our community, have things for kids to come out and just do something positive. And we find ourselves repeatedly asking, but not getting a response. Today, myself, along with my colleague who's really been a point person, reached out again, and we finally got a response, but now we're looking at less than 2 weeks to do something. We've been told by our printer it's going to cost us more to get the flyers printed up, those kind of things there. And I was feeling like if we're part of the community and we're doing something for the community, I want to feel like it's a partnership with the schools. I don't feel like I'm trying to break in to do something for the community. So I think what we need to have is some kind of established protocol with some realistic timelines and expectations when we're trying to partner with the schools, so that we don't feel like we're being shoved out or being excluded from the community. Hopefully you understand where I'm coming from, and hopefully we can do something where we can all be a part of building a stronger Pickerington and a stronger school district. Thank you.
Thank you. I was thinking Ben's. Yeah. Yeah. All right, made a note. Thank you, sir. The next individual we have is Amy Voigt regarding the vaccination clinic.
Hi, my name is Amy Voigt. My address is 9587 Half Farm Drive. I actually had a couple of questions. First one, has the issue been resolved with the counselor who had posted on her website and then was under review? I wanted to know what the conclusion of that was. Secondly, I'd like to know where Dr. Briggs is. It looks like he's...
I'm right here.
Oh, hi, there you are.
Yeah.
I didn't hear you in the roll call, sorry. And I would like to point out that Dr. Briggs works for you guys, and you guys answer to the voters. And so if he makes a mandate, he is accountable for what he does. He is accountable to you. And so we're coming to you talking about medical freedom and asking as parents, for our rights to make medical decisions for our kids back. And this is something that you as a board have a responsibility to act on. The primary reason that I'm here tonight is because I'm kind of appalled about the vaccination clinics. I remember reading in history about medical experimentation, and I remember reading about how there were particular demographics of people who did not have means, and as a result, they were enticed into becoming part of medical experiments by promises of free things, and Tuskegee didn't end well for anybody. But once again, we have a situation where a medical experiment, which the vaccine for 12 to 15-year-olds is a medical experiment at this point. It is not approved. Countries in Europe have said the risks outweigh the benefits and have not approved it for their 12 to 15-year-olds. And yet in Pickerington, we're saying, come and get it. And what are we dangling for these kids to come and get it? We're saying we'll give you free admission to these extracurricular activities. We'll give you free this, we'll give you free that. Oh, look, it's a jolly competition between schools. This is a fundamental problem because the people most likely to be attracted to a program, to a medical program, because of free incentives, the offers of free things, are people for whom paying for those things might be an issue. It disproportionately targets people who have lower means, and I think that that's simply abominable. If PLSD is going to make vaccine clinics available, whether or not that's their right to do so is not my area of expertise. It should be done without incentives. It should be done without peer pressure. And it should be done by communicating with the parents rather than communicating with the students. Thank you.
Thank you. The next individual we have is Mr. Adam Johnson for school, or to speak about school choice.
I'm just going to sit down this time. There we go. I'm not going to make you keep moving. You missed it last week. So anyways, I'm ready to start. I don't have a speech prepared or anything like that. I just have a few things I want to share from my heart. I put down school choice as the item I wanted to talk about when I came in today. And the reason why that struck to me is because you've taken all the choices away from us. I have been a proponent of school vouchers and school choice before I had kids. And the last 6 months has proven that beyond a shadow of a doubt. Now, I might get booed for this, but I actually have to say thank you to Dr. Briggs for last year being the one I know to push for in-school teaching. I know you did that, and I appreciate that. So I want to say thank you.
Why would you be booed? It's all right.
Because you're not very popular, by the way.
It's all right.
Because you single-handedly did a mandate that the school board didn't get to vote on and that
I'm
the
sorry.
parents didn't want to support. That's why. So anyways, school choice. That's why I'm here to say, you know what, I'm for school choice. But the choice I'm making right now, I am absolutely unenrolling my kids from PLSD. We're searching for the curriculum that we believe is not full of Marxism, not full of man's view, evolution, things that just aren't edifying to anyone, quite honestly. So we're doing that. I'm letting you know, hey, we're going to do that. And actually, I'm going to turn this way. If you actually do believe in,
Sir, I need you to address the board.
there you go. If you believe in the things that you stand for out here today, I would encourage every parent who's listening or in here in attendance to pull their child from this school district. The money is what matters, and that's all that we've been following. The CARES Act funding that required fully universal right mask wearing, pushing agendas of vaccine clinics to bribe students and parents into getting a shot they may not want, but it's free. And hey, guess what? Here's $150 basically for school events. I think that's wrong. Now, if you host a clinic and you don't want to give away free things, that's fine. I'm not against that, right? I don't think anyone's against that. But what we are against is bribery and coercion. We're against taking away our choice for basically everything. Yeah, and that's what I came to say. I appreciate the time. I'm going to keep coming to the school board meetings because I do live here. I will be voting in November, and I represent a group or part of there's many groups now, by the way, who have formed, who want to hear from the candidates and the current school board members about your position of this, because we still don't know who would vote yes for this mask mandate. I asked for that last meeting. I believe Ms. Niekamp brought it up to put on the agenda. The one thing I want to come away with is, how would you vote on a mask mandate? And I feel sorry for the pastor. We all feel the same way. We don't get a response. Thank you.
The next individual is Mary Johnson to speak about Board Policy 8450-01 regarding facial coverings.
Hi, thank you. Can you guys hear me? Okay, my name's Mary Johnson. I live at 182 Old Mound Lane. There's been a lot of pushback on the district mask policy for K through 6. Many have claimed that masks do not work, that our children's masks are dirty, gross, and therefore dangerous, and that masking should be a personal choice. Unfortunately, every one of those claims goes against expert research and advice, including that of the CDC, the AAP, and all local health departments. Parental framing has caused some children undue stress about masking. Parents have taught their children that masking is unreasonable. They have taught them to resist it and to be stressed out about it. But I know that I'm not alone in having children that can and do wear clean, good-fitting masks all day long. They understand that it's the price of public life during a pandemic. I have framed it as such. It's something we do to protect ourselves and our community. Over the past 18 months, it has been repeatedly shown that masking is an effective way to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. If people want to make personal decisions that contradict the advice of the CDC, AAP, and all other public health institutions, they should do so outside of a public school building. They should choose other schooling options. I'd like to focus the rest of my address on the religious exemptions allowed by Board Policy 8450.1. The policy explicitly states that the religious requirement must be both established and sincerely held. Those are specific criteria, and they're not being met. The community has been manipulative in masking their personal and political beliefs as religious ones. Those claiming religious exemptions have been willing to flout these so-called religious beliefs to wear scarves and ski masks in winter, to wear costume masks for Halloween, to attend public venues such as restaurants, shops, grocery stores, and schools throughout the 11 months when masks were mandatory in our state, and for some, even to travel on airplanes and visit amusement parks. Indeed, such religious beliefs, if sincerely held, would also make certain professions off limits for consideration, such as doctors, nurses, and firefighters, and they would prohibit the use of masks for protection from dust and fumes. But the fact of the matter is, these beliefs are not religious in nature, nor do they have moral equivalency. Sincerely held religious beliefs cannot be flouted for convenience or comfort, and any personal moral conviction would not hold religious equivalency unless the various face coverings and contexts I mentioned previously were also prohibited. Everyone in this community knows that's not the case because these are preferences, not religion. These religious claims are insincere. As such, I ask that board members refrain from coaching families into specific wording to obtain an approved religious exemption, and I strongly encourage the superintendent and administration to withdraw the approval of religious exemptions already granted and to refrain from approving any more unless you can confirm that the established and sincerely held criteria are met. Those who oppose public health and safety measures must accept that there is no requirement that their convictions come with convenience. They can choose one of Ohio's free virtual schooling or homeschool options. Thank you.
Thank you. The next individual is Mark Hinson to speak about success for all students.
Good evening, guys. My name is Mark Henson. I live at 13395 White Cross Drive in Pickerington. As previously mentioned, I'm here for the next several meetings to bring up a number of issues that I think the board needs to be more aware of and the district needs to be more focused on. Last time I talked about both college and career readiness and as well as kindergarten readiness problems, along with some ideas to address both. Tonight, I want to talk about making success possible for every student. Currently, equitable outcomes are not being achieved throughout PLSD in everything from state achievement test scores to school discipline. In the area of state tests, as you all know, tests are taken starting in third grade and then every year through high school in math, reading, or English, and in high school, in the higher grades, science, as well as government and history. The standard is that 80% of each grade pass those tests. Well, in most cases of those tests, less than 80% of each grade passes those tests, which is why the district got an F from the Ohio Department of Education in that measure. Even worse is that there are performance gaps of more than 35 percentage points among white, black, and Hispanic students. As just one example, in seventh grade math, 82% of white students passed the test, while only 46% of Hispanic students and 48% of black students passed the test. Those are significant issues that need to be better addressed. Now for some ideas to help ensure success for every student. The first several ideas are the same as for college and career readiness, but they're so critical, I want to go over them again. The biggest thing is for the board and district to first acknowledge and highlight the issue to increase awareness and communication and then focus among all PLSD stakeholders. The next three things are simple concepts, but they're not easy to execute and they're all tied together. First, PLSD staff needs to embrace high expectations for all students to nurture a growth mindset. Second, the PLSD staff need to build caring, trusting, respecting relationships with all the students so that they want to meet those high expectations. Third is to ensure engaging instruction for all the students. The more involved students are in their own learning, the less likely they are to be bored and distracted. Those three things done right and done well will significantly improve student academic performance as well as reduce behavior issues. Other ideas include ensuring professional development for all PLSD staff and cultural competency and implicit bias. Additionally, discipline needs a complete overhaul. The focus should be on prevention, positive relationships, and restorative practices, things like restitution, community service, community building circles, tools that emphasize corrective action and taking responsibility for one's actions instead of exclusion via suspensions. As a postscript, it's been 6 months since the PLSD Citizen Advisory Committee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion briefed school board members in March on their findings, which included dozens of recommended solutions, and there still has been no brief to the community regarding which solutions will be adopted and which ones won't. That's not an outcome that builds trust and confidence with the community that the CAC effort was a serious one. Finally, on an unrelated note, I noticed on social media very recently that 2 board members indicated that they could address our school overcrowding without new taxes. I'd be very interested in them speaking of what that entails. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. The next individual we have is Shelley Kirkland to speak about the health and wellness clinics to students.
Good evening. My name is Shelley Kirkland. I'm at 7982 Brookfield Place, Canal Winchester. I'm in Jefferson Farms. I want to thank you for the opportunity to address you, and I'm going to ask for a little bit of grace on the whole 3-minute thing because I didn't know if I was going to be able to make this, so I didn't have a prepared presentation. The 5 o'clock time is very difficult for any kind of working professional to make these meetings. And so because of that, I kind of threw together some notes while I changed my clothes at the same time. So I'm going to ask a little bit of grace on my speech not being very well presented. First, I'm going to address the, as well as was mentioned earlier, I want to address the vaccine clinic. I think offering those vaccine clinics is a fine idea. When my daughter was in first grade at Heritage, the Fairfield Board of Health came and offered the H1N1 vaccine, and I had her get that. I think that's a fine idea. Make that available for whomever would want that. The incentives, though, are repugnant at best. I think that like I said, just, I'm not really sure how bribing minors is even legal, but nonetheless, I get that their parents were consenting to that. But I think that's just really kind of gross, to incentivize a healthcare outcome for kids, and giving them something free like that. So I just want to put that out there first so that that's on record that I feel like it's repugnant. As I move on here, so if everything that you guys are doing is about health and well-being for our kids, the mask mandates, the vaccine clinics that are being offered, I guess I would want to come at it at a different angle. What about health and wellness clinics? I've never seen that offered before. And I guess I'm looking at the incentives offered, for the vaccine clinic. Why couldn't we do something similar for a health and wellness clinic? Why couldn't we offer kids incentives to participate in a clinic where they maybe come to the gym or whatever, and they're educated on what are healthy foods to eat. A lot of kids in the junior high and the high school will be heading to college in a few years, and these kids need to know how to pick healthy foods to eat, how to carve out time to exercise so that they can become healthy adults. When we look at childhood obesity, I did a little quick research while I was jotting my quick notes. 1 in 3 kids in the US today is overweight or obese. Which obviously they a lot of times become overweight or obese adults. We also know with relation to COVID that obesity is one of the leading factors in poor outcomes for COVID in both adults and children. So as I was walking in, I noticed the sign on the front of the building. It says, "We educate, we engage, we empower." But I feel like if we want to educate our children, we should educate them on how to take care of themselves and become well adults. I think that we should engage them in their own health care rather than teaching them that take a shot, that'll fix it. And I think that we should empower them that way to lead healthy lives going forward as adults. And the healthier that we are as adults, the less prone we are to poor outcomes from illness in our future. So I guess my suggestion might be, or I don't know how this would become organized. That's not my place to do that. That's yours. Maybe it's Dr. Briggs who would need to pull the trigger on something like that, or the nurse practitioner perhaps, to put together some sort of wellness clinic for kids. Let's take BMI measurements. Let's teach them how to choose healthy foods. Let's teach them how to exercise and make that a part of their long-term adult lives. And let's educate them. Let's engage them, and let's empower them on their health rather than just taking some sort of biologic to fix all their problems. Thank you.
Thank you. The last speaker we have is Jessica, I'm going to say Seville. I hope that's correct, to speak about school fees.
Good evening. My name is Jessica Savai, and I reside at 752 Salisbury Street. And like many of the parents, I have reached out to the board and also the superintendent regarding school fees and haven't gotten a response. I am asking the board to look into the issue of school fees. My children are attending Pickerington Public Schools. It is the law that students receive fair and equitable access to public school education, free education. I do not understand why, as a tax-paying citizen of the resident of the city of Pickerington, that I am paying school fees. Again, I'm a tax-paying resident, and you also are receiving 1% of my husband and I's income tax, okay? Again, I can't stress it enough. I'm asking the board to look into this issue. To date, my husband and I have a $500 balance with the school board, and I believe that this is insane. And I'm sure I'm not the only parent that takes issue with this, and if there are any other parents in the audience, please speak up, okay?
Our next section is section C for the treasurer's report. Mr. Jenkins, I'll turn it over to you.
So the first item under C1 are the minutes from the August 23rd, 2021 board meeting.
Is there a motion and a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Jenkins, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Sanders,
Yes.
Mr. Lopez,
Yes.
Mrs. Olszewski,
Yes.
Mrs. Niekamp,
Yes.
Mr. Kristoff.
Yes.
Next item is the monthly report. The month ending August 2021 financial report is attached.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion?
I just, if you could highlight, these are great reports. I love them. I love the colors. Make me pay attention. If you could highlight two things for our community, if you will, please. Number one is, given our numbers to date, and I know they fluctuate almost hourly in the district, our enrollment figures, approximately how many students have we added to our enrollment rolls from last year to this year?
So if you look at the executive summary and content, and I think it's about page 7, last year, we would have had a kind of average or combined across various points of the year. If you do a combined FTE, we were at 10,370. This year, we're at 10,852. So we're up right now nearly 500 students. There's about probably 60 or 70 students that we're cleaning up in that 10,852 that were kind of crossing Ts and dotting Is about their status as to enrolling in a different school district for reasons that deal with educational management information systems. We can't withdraw them until we know they've landed somewhere else.
Right, yeah.
But if you even back out those students, 10,800, we're up 450 to 500 students over last year.
And in general, I know the numbers aren't going to be, spot on, but in general, we're estimated to add about 100 students a year going forward on average per year.
Unless this year becomes more normal.
The norm, yeah.
We expected a bubble. We got one. If you look where we were in 2020, we were at 10,530.
Mhm.
If you go up 150 or so students from what would have been a normal 2020, 2021,
Yeah.
and then another 150
Yeah.
or so, we would be right where we are right now.
Yeah.
But when you compare it to where we were last year, it's a sizable increase. So yes, that's my, I guess, anecdotal view that we'll go back to a more 150 to 200 student clip. If
Which
this
is
year
compass.
becomes the norm,
Mhm.
that's going to be highly problematic very quickly.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to make assumptions based off of just last year to this year, but you
Correct.
have to look at the totality over the last few years and then projecting forward, and it is definitely an uphill,
Yes.
upward trending enrollment curve, if you will.
We were artificially low last year. We know that we
Yeah,
dealt with
right, last year was.
the heart of the pandemic.
Mhm.
So that's why this year feels so much worse, but it still is right at 500 students. Even if we were on pace, we would have been 150 to 200 students above where we were last year if last year was on pace.
And many of our buildings are
They're
just
full.
packed to the gills.
They're pretty
yeah.
full.
And then my second question has to do with our operating monies. I am looking at a downward sloping curve when it comes to things like multiple data points, but one of them being days of cash on hand. And that curve tends to slope downward as we move forward really indefinitely until we can see some increase in revenue sources, either by the taxpayers or the state, because those are essentially our two funding sources.
Yeah, the very first page of the executive summary, which is page 3 of the report, we have about 92 days cash at the end of fiscal 21, assuming fiscal 22 projections are accurate, and this is general fund, obviously.
Right.
About 84 days cash, but by the time you get to the 25-26 school year, it's obviously anticipating that our cash would be depleted.
Yeah.
That being said, We have continued to stretch operating resources. We've not had an operating levy in this district since August of 2011.
It's almost unbelievable.
We've stretched it now. It's going to be obviously 10 years.
And going on 11.
And, well, we're past 10 years
Yeah.
because it's
Right.
September of 2021.
Yeah.
And the 5-year forecast as it currently presents, if someone were to back me in a corner and say, where would you absolutely have to shoot for a levy? Remember last year, towards the end of May and June, we were trying to stretch one more year, and we did that. I'm feeling confident that at this point in time, there's no reason why we couldn't make it through the 23-24 school year. That being said, factors could change, but I feel confident that you've got fiscal 24 where we would still have carryover cash of about 17.4 million. That's getting tight, so to speak, and that would be where I would say you're probably looking at a levy somewhere in the neighborhood of spring 24, fall 24. I wouldn't want to try to go a whole lot further
Even though
than that.
we couldn't start recognizing proceeds from the passage of that levy, any levy, until the next year.
That's correct.
You pass in year 1 and you start recognizing proceeds in year 2.
It would be January of 25.
Yeah, so we can't, yeah, so it's,
That's right.
okay. Thank you. I just wanted to highlight that for the community.
Yep.
So Ryan, in that note, on that same page, you noted with the changes of the state funding formula, are we expecting anything drastic out of that formula? I know you just noted that between now and November, there might be a little bit of play in those numbers. I just wanted to know what your outlook is on what that the new pieces of the funding formula might look like.
The biggest change would be being up in enrollment will drive, because this year's funding formula is more responsive to current enrollment trends, whereas in the past, the funding formula looked at previous years. So that's the first thing that could tend to drive the revenue up, is being up 500 students could result in additional state revenue. The biggest impact for state revenue, though, will be after this biennial budget. As you all know, it's called the Fair School Funding Formula now, but the Fair School Funding Formula has been restricted by the budget, and major pieces of it are only being funded at about 50 to 60%. So will the state in 2 years allow the funding formula to operate exactly as it's written, or will they continue, for lack of a better word, to put governors on it to restrain it? If the full funding formula were in place, I have a feeling, again, it's anecdotal, I would analyze it, but what you see here would be even better. So operationally, I think that I have been conservative enough that the only thing, when I get all of the pieces of the state budget analyzed and installed in the forecast, it's going to get even better. And that's operationally.
Mhm.
The flip side of that is, as we've talked, obviously, over the course of the last 2 years, our buildings are full. And so, yeah, that's kind of where we are right now.
Okay, thank you. Anything further?
No, that's fine. I'm good.
I believe we have a motion and a second, so Mr. Jenkins, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Lopez,
Yes.
Mrs. Olszewski,
Yes.
Mrs. Niekamp,
Yes.
Mr. Kristoff,
Yes.
Mrs. Sanders.
Yes.
Item C3, by October 1 of every fiscal year, we have to have in place what's called a permanent appropriation resolution. That's just a fancy term for a final budget. Final in terms of, it's called final by the law. It can be modified throughout the course of the year, but this would represent across all funds the district's budget that we'll submit to the county auditor.
Motion to approve.
Any discussion? Mr. Jenkins, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Olszewski,
Yes.
Mrs. Niekamp,
Yes.
Mr. Kristoff,
Yes.
Mrs. Sanders,
Yes.
Mr. Lopez.
Yes.
I think you're all familiar with the next item. We would have had a Board of Revision and Board of Tax Appeals settlement agreement with Coles.
Is there a motion and a second?
So move.
Second.
Again, keep bringing these on.
Any discussion?
Just a comment that if people aren't aware, This is basically, for lack of a better word, going after money that we as a district believe we should be entitled to. Other than the taxpayers' money, they're with businesses that have tried to maybe potentially keep their value lower, to lower their tax burden. So we have not always aggressively gone after those as we have in the last, how many years, Ryan?
About 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So this is a good thing. These are tax dollars that are being funded by someone else.
Any other discussion, comments? Mr. Jenkins, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Niekamp?
Yes.
Mr. Kristoff?
Yes.
Mrs. Sanders?
Yes.
Mr. Lopez?
Yes.
Mrs. Olszewski?
Yes.
Unusual, the donations list that grows here in September. We would have gotten a $5,000 donation from the Tollgate PTO.
Thank you.
And that's it.
Our next section is section D for the consent agenda. Dr. Briggs, do you want to walk us through those items?
Yeah, board members, this evening under consent agenda items, number 1 is certificated licensed personnel. We're asking the board to approve the teacher tutor recommendations for the 2021-22 school year, following the contract or making sure that there's a pending completion of all employment materials and/or background reports. We also, on the agenda underneath number 1, we have substitute teachers, and I want to thank again our HR department. As we know, this continues to be a challenge for all school districts throughout Central Ohio and Ohio, finding quality substitutes. We have a substitute administrator that we're asking the board to approve this evening. We do have 1 staff member that is on assault leave. We're asking the board to approve that leave this evening. And then we have a resident educator mentor coordinator position at the rate and the stipend as listed. We're asking the board to approve. That is the certificated licensed personnel section. If there are any questions.
I just want to state the obvious that it is disappointing and disgusting that we have to approve assault leave for a staff member. This is not who this community is. We love and value and place in very high regard our staff members at any level. And if ever this happens, we will do whatever it takes to protect them and allow them to fully heal so they can come back to the classroom.
Absolutely.
This is disappointing.
Thank you. Any other questions? Board members, under number 2, consent agenda items is support personnel. We're asking the board to accept the letter of resignation from the individuals as listed, their building assignment and their effective date. Also, we're asking the board this evening to accept a letter of resignation for retirement purposes from the person as listed, and want to thank them for their service to PLSD. We do on the agenda underneath support personnel have some contract adjustments to approve the salary and contract adjustments for the individuals as listed and their positions and their hourly rates. And then also under support personnel recommendations, we're recommending the following individuals to be approved for a 1-year limited contract for this school year, pending completion of all employment materials and/or background reports. And as you can see, those are all replacements. And then we have substitute support service recommendations for the positions, the hourly rate, and the individuals that we're recommending for approval this evening. That is conclusion of the support personnel section under the consent agenda. Is there any questions? Hearing none. Number 3 is personnel supplemental contracts and stipends. Again, it's that time of year. Supplemental contract and stipend recommendations. We're asking the board to approve the following supplemental contracts and stipends for the school year following completion of all employment materials. We also have stipends on here. We have the building, the name of the person, the assignment, the group, and the salary as listed. We are asking the board to approve this evening the building club volunteer, recommend approval for the following club and volunteer advisor for this school year with the faculty leadership team's recommendation as submitted. And then we have a self-funded club. We're recommending that the board approve the following self-funded clubs for this school year. The advisor stipend is based on the total number of students, fees collected per activity, including benefits not to exceed the compensation in Article 9, Group 6B of the Master Agreement. That is the personnel supplemental contracts and stipend section. Is there any question from board? Hearing none. Number 4 is budget and purpose statements. We're asking the board to approve the budget and purpose statements as submitted. Is there any questions? Hearing none. Number 5 is consent other. Congratulations to the students listed. The following students have requested to graduate early. The student's name, their grade, their building, and the early graduation date, and the date that they will receive their diploma is listed. Is there any questions under early graduation? Board members, that is the consent agenda items for this evening.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I just forget, with our alternative school students, do they walk with their home school at graduation?
Yes.
Okay, I thought so, but I just wanted to ask. Thanks.
Any other questions? Mr. Jenkins, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Niekamp.
Yes.
Mr. Kristoff.
Yes.
Mrs. Sanders.
Yes.
Mr. Lopez.
Yes.
Mrs. Olszewski.
Yes.
Our next section is discussion action, section E. Dr. Briggs, do you want to walk us through those items?
Yes, board members, this evening under discussion action items, the number 1 is we have an administrator resignation and administrator of their contract. We're asking the board to accept that resignation this evening.
Is there a motion and a second?
I think there's another item.
We do one at a time. You want to do both together?
Yeah. Do we do both together? They're on the same.
They're on the same line.
Yeah.
I don't have any issue doing them
We do both together? Okay.
Yeah.
And the second one, board members, we are asking the recommend to approve the individual as listed as a district office social worker, their group position, and their annual salary.
Is there a motion and a second?
So move.
Second.
Any discussion?
I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
Was the resignation given of the person's free will?
Yes, it was.
Any other discussion? Mr. Jenkins, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kristoff.
Yes.
Mrs. Sanders.
Yes.
Mr. Lopez.
Yes.
Mrs. Olszewski.
Yes.
Mrs. Niekamp.
Yes.
Thank you, board members. Under discussion action number 2, we have special education contracts. We are asking the board to approve the following contracts for this school year as listed.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Jenkins, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Sanders.
Yes.
Mr. Lopez.
Yes.
Mrs. Olszewski.
Yes.
Mrs. Niekamp.
Yes.
Mr. Kristoff.
Yes.
Thank you, board members. Under number 3 is revised job descriptions. These are the second readings. We have 3 policies: administrative secretary at the Welcome Center, food service driver, custodian, and food service delivery driver. We're asking the board to approve these job descriptions this evening.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just these are positions that we're having difficulty filling as well, aren't they?
Correct.
So-
Absolutely.
Any help from the community in finding people for those positions would
Absolutely.
be appreciated.
Any other discussion? Mr. Jenkins, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Lopez.
Yes.
Mrs. Olszewski.
Yes.
Mrs. Niekamp.
Yes.
Mr. Kristoff.
Yes.
Mrs. Sanders.
Thank you, board members. Under the last item under discussion action, we're asking the board to approve a permanent increase in the substitute cook cashier rate increase at a rate of 13 per hour effective September 4th. This again, based on the shortage of employees that we have, we're hoping to attract other candidates for the positions.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Are there, so this is a permanent increase, right?
Permanent increase in
Regardless of the
substitute, yes.
challenges we currently face?
That is correct.
Okay. Are we looking at other positions?
We are.
Okay. I would hope that, I mean, just kind of as an ongoing standard.
And we've done it in
operating
certain positions,
Yeah.
such as substitute teaching and other
Yeah.
places. We've increased the rate to try to be competitive with other
Right.
districts in Central Ohio.
It's rough out there.
It is.
Any other discussion, comments? Mr. Jenkins, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Olszewski.
Yes.
Mrs. Niekamp.
Yes.
Mr. Kristoff.
Yes.
Mrs. Sanders.
Yes.
Mr. Lopez.
Yes. Our next section is Section F, discussion only. Our first item is contract with Creative Leadership for leadership performance coaching.
If you don't mind, Mr. Lopez, I'll jump in here. We're excited about this. I know Ms. Gillison's in the front row. We have an opportunity to work with this organization and provide our principals some support. And the one thing that we heard is that this was a neutral kind of coaching support that we feel is going to be great professional development for our administrators. We have a lot of young administrators in our school district. We think this is going to benefit them, not only professionally, but it gives them the opportunity to receive some assistance as needed. Right now, we know our principals are drowning. With COVID and everything that's happening and the requirements and the things that are added to their plate, we think these coaching positions will refocus them back to instructional leadership, which we think is probably the most important thing, obviously is the most important thing that we feel our principals do in their buildings. So Ms. Gillison, did I cover that? Or do you have anything else you'd like to add? I don't want to put you on the spot, but.
That's fine. Good evening, Board.
Good evening.
I wanted to add to Dr. Briggs, we're really excited about it. Each principal gets their own coach, and these coaches have experience at the elementary level, the secondary level, experience in turnaround districts and districts that are similar to our district, very diverse districts and growing districts. The coaching will be confidential. So the coaches aren't meeting with the principals and then will come and share anything with myself or Dr. Briggs. It is the growth mindset for the building principals, helping them to focus on instructional leadership in a time like this when it's hard to focus on instructional leadership during COVID.
And Mrs. Gillison, this contract is, I assumed, Ms. Gillison, sorry, that this contract is with a company called Creative Learning Solutions.
Creative Learning
Solutions, great.
Yes, founded by.
Oh, leaderships. I
Yeah,
can't
for
read
leadership.
Yeah, it says leadership.
Somebody help me with the big words, okay.
Founded by Dr. Doug Reeves. If any of you are familiar with Doug Reeves' work, this is an organization that he founded.
Great, thank you.
Question, do we have, are we establishing an academic goal associated to this?
Absolutely. So, and it's all going to go back to our plan for
principles.
progress and the academic excellence standard. So we will be doing rounds. And when I say we, the teaching and learning team, we are actually going out to buildings as the building leadership team shares their goals and their challenges, their strengths and their challenges. And we're ensuring that they're aligned with our district goals. And then we also want to be able to provide the support buildings may need at this time. So as opposed to having our building leadership teams come here and meet with us, we're actually taking the full force of our teaching and learning team and going out to the buildings to meet not only with the building administrator on setting those goals, but the entire BLT.
And Mrs. Niekamp, if I could piggyback off of that too, I think one of the things you're asking too is, I think the neat thing about this is our principals are establishing their professional goals based on the higher principal standards.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Ms. Gillison's working with them on. And part of that growth is going to be working with these coaches, making sure they meet those goals. So it's more than just saying, hey, I've got support or somebody to talk to or to pick, it is more than that. It's really digging deep into how can they improve their instruction in their buildings, following those standards, meeting their professional goals, and moving their buildings forward. So that's what we're excited about. And it provides that additional support that we think our principals need at this time.
Will, will we as the board get any kind of a report back about what specific buildings are working on academically?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I just had one question about the actual venue or ability. I noticed that even though I know you can have an LLC anywhere, I noticed it's an out-of-state group. Is all the contact remote, or do they have a local group that works out of here, like if they wanted to visit the school?
Most of the contact is remote, but there will be times when they will come in and meet with their individual principal.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Some people do better that way. That's why I asked. Face-to-face rather than remote.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Ms. Gillison.
Thank you. Any other discussion about that contract?
Board members, the second one under discussion only is Board Policy 8450.01, protective facial coverings during pandemic and epidemic events. That we were wanting to have an open discussion about that this evening.
So are we going to kick off about where we got to policy-wise?
Yeah, that's what I was going to do.
Okay, you go ahead.
So we, with Mrs. Neekham's suggestion at the last meeting, we did convene our policy meeting group to go over this policy and to begin looking at it. We spent about, I would say 20 minutes and literally didn't get past the first sentence. And that's the truth. So we kind of came to a decision that because we can only do things in public forums with the 5 of us, that it would probably be a more appropriate discussion to have here at the meeting. And it's very difficult to draft a policy when there are, or I guess what is believed to be diverse opinions about what the policy should say or how it should read or how it should be enforced. So that's as far as we got. And at the 20-minute mark, we said, well, we're just spinning our wheels because we don't know how all the board members feel. And so we should have an open discussion here as it's provided in our agenda. So that is where we're at.
And just to piggyback off of Clay, we recognize, as would anyone who reads it, it's, it was a best effort by someone to put a policy together, no one here, in the midst of COVID that had to do with masks. And it's not very well written and it's not very clear. So now would be the time to talk about what are the wishes so that we can bring back something that people would like it, to look like.
Well, if I could just get clarification, and for the community, we work with a firm called Neola, used to stand for something, but now I think the acronym's gone and they just call themselves Neola, who work with upwards of, I believe, 2/3 of the school districts in the state of Ohio to write, draft, edit policy. Particularly, we use them for numerous reasons, but not the least of which is they follow the law. And we can't keep up with the law on a day-to-day basis sometimes. And so they assist school districts like us in writing policy that matches and parallels the law as it ebbs and flows. So I guess my first question is, for now, is at the bottom of the policy that states that this is a Neola policy. So did they write this? Do you recall because I was here when we approved it, but I know, so they wrote it. Did we make any changes? I think we did some tweaks, but in general, they drafted the policy, which is a policy then they offered to their other 1,800 school clients.
Yeah, I don't recall either at the time, but usually when they do give us these, it'll go down, line,
Yeah.
and then choose A or B for the next
Mhm.
line, choose A or B.
Yeah.
So some things they have in body and other things they actually put choices on.
Gotcha.
And
Yep. Okay.
This has been an incredibly confusing one.
Yeah.
Because we know Chris got a legal opinion that, he could move forward as the superintendent to make the decisions. But he was also in our policy meeting and we all thought it was just incredibly muddy.
Yeah, there's a lot of language
not well
overlap
written.
here. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and ultimately, I reached out to Neola, to our rep, to try to make sense of what was some of the intent in the different paragraphs, specifically because it starts out speaking about a plan or resolution of the board, but it talks then about the superintendent making a decision, but it doesn't reference students. Then later it references students, but talks about the board. It also talks about exemptions and how to get them approved for staff, but is completely silent and doesn't give any other information about how a parent or student go about getting those exemptions. But in talking to Neola, I determined that lots of districts throughout Ohio use the exact same policy, and it's being implemented in a whole bunch of different ways. So in some ways, their superintendent is activating this and taking complete authority on it. In other ways, there is a plan and a resolution of the board that the superintendent's activating. And yet they were clear that it also clearly grants the freedom of the board to take action as it sees fit as well. So ultimately, the conversation with them didn't give me the answer that I think we were looking for, I was looking for, which was what was the original intent. They clearly focused on that it gives a lot of freedom to the district to decide how they want to implement the policy, and asking them with their experience with other districts, and then spending a lot of time searching other districts' minutes and such. They're correct. It's all over the place. So I think ultimately we have to decide what it is that we're going to do. I think it's also important that we decide what we're doing come October 13th, because we do have legislation that we have to follow that will say whether we treat the vaccinated any differently than the unvaccinated. And right now, in currently what we're doing, we'd have to make some sort of change to that. So ultimately, I took what our current policy is and tried to change as least amount of words as possible, but gave you the pieces that I would like to see as far as a revision to the policy, just to begin the discussion.
Well, I will agree with Vanessa on the referenced code because I could not quite figure out how they align with facial coverings, like searching a locker. I don't know, but that's for a legal mind.
I did ask that as well, how those were selected, and I was told that they could look into it and get back to us.
Prescribed curriculum policy regarding, it didn't make sense to me, but I will address one line, Vanessa, that I don't agree with you on, which is your first change, which is that the superintendent may activate this policy, in your words, in alignment with public health orders. If I'm understanding public health orders in this day and time in the state of Ohio, the legislature has restricted, removed, is a better word, the ability for either the governor or any of his health department designees to issue public health orders. Am I interpreting that piece of legislation correctly? So
That's my understanding.
if that's my understanding. So in which case, since the state cannot issue, or any public health department cannot issue a public health order, then the rest of the words become moot. So I don't know what your intent was, but your words were that we would only activate the policy in alignment with public health orders, none of which will ever occur in the state of Ohio under current legislation.
I thought the
Well,
legislation had a caveat for
Yeah.
an X period of time and only under X circumstance that they could, in a true emergency state, they could claim a state of emergency. I believe there was some.
Yeah, my understanding in reviewing public health orders is that the legislature took action saying that a public health order can still be issued. However, I believe it's 23 days after it's issued, the legislature then has to either uphold or rescind that health order. So it doesn't take away the ability for a health order to be put in place. It just requires the General Assembly to speak for the people and act on day 23.
In which case, I can't support this statement because
Well-
of the implication of the law.
Okay, but if that's the case, then you can't support our current policy because it uses the word an edict in the very first paragraph. And the definition of edict is an official order or proclamation issued by a person in authority.
Fair enough. I'll agree with that.
So, I
Yeah,
mean.
that we need to be consistent.
Right. And so that was one of the first issues that I had
I see. Okay.
with the policy is the use of the word edict.
I was wondering where in the first sentence you stopped.
Well, there's another place in the very
Yes.
first paragraph that we didn't get through because it says, will offer periodic guidance through Board of Education plans, resolutions in alignment with the public health and in accordance with government edicts, and including any pandemic plan developed by the district's pandemic response team. We don't have, when it comes to the masks, we don't have anything that specific that's in a pandemic plan or a district pandemic response team. So we went to strike it, and then it was like, okay, do we strike it? Or do we come back and say, okay, board, do you want a district pandemic response team that is responsible for a plan that has to do with mask, facial covering? So we just need to know, and we can bring back something that's in line with where people want to be. Because if not, we could have spent several hours and be way out in left field
And Lori,
where people are.
and if I could piggyback off of that too, I think one of the things, first of all, I know I'm not very popular, but that's okay. I mean, the bottom line is this: nobody wants, 3 years ago, nobody ever even imagined we'd be having this conversation about a pandemic and about having our students wear masks or our staff. And so to preference that, I just want to say this. I think one of the things that we need to discuss openly as a community is we want to keep our kids in school 5 days a week. I think everybody up here and everybody in the audience wants the same goal, because I know that is my goal, regardless of what decision we discuss about the policy. I think our ultimate goal is to keep our kids in school.
Right.
And that's the challenge we face ahead of us, regardless of who makes this decision. I'm okay with having this discussion about the policy. The policy committee was very open. No one says that one decision is the right one, because we know that 50% of our community is going to be upset regardless of what decision we make. And so I want us to do what's best for our kids and our students. And I do agree that we want to put our students and our staff in a position to be healthy and safety, and we want to be in school 5 days a week. That's our goal. And so I'm looking forward to having this discussion. I really was tonight, because this is important for our district to have, and to have it with our community members and listening to the concerns we had. I took notes, and I appreciate everybody's concerns, and just know that these are not easy decisions. And whatever we do as a board, or whether we do it as a superintendent, we are going to do it with the best interests of our students in mind. And so with that being said, I just wanted to clarify that we never thought we would ever be put in this position, but we are, and we'll deal with it. And that's part of what we do. And I appreciate the fact that the board wanted to bring this forward. We all have difference of opinions about whether we be vaccinated or not vaccinated, mask or no mask. We all have difference of opinions, and that's okay. We just have to be civil, and we have to be able to discuss these openly and honestly. So thank you.
So I had a thought that now that we've established that the policy is very poorly written, we understand that. My thought is that, do we want to shelf? We have another Neola review and update coming next week. Is it the 22nd that we meet?
So. Yeah.
So that's going to bring in a whole semi-annual review. So that means, in theory, we would only be having a first reading on the next meeting, and then a second meeting in October. So any changes that may, which we don't know if this policy's in there, come, would not be until at least 4 weeks from now. So my question is, do you want once we understand where everybody is, us to work on this policy? Do we want to wait and include it with Neola's batch? And if that's the case, do we want resolutions brought back instead at the next meeting, defining that this is what happens with facial coverings, or this is what happens with facial coverings? We just want to know what you guys want us to do.
Wouldn't it be also a broader discussion, making a decision about facial coverings? I mean, that's affecting our quarantines, that's affecting all those things. It's not as easy, it's not just, hey, let's do this because we think this. You got to think how, okay, if we decide this, I mean, it seems like an easy word here is in alignment with public health recommendations instead of orders. Is a very easy a place to compromise on that one word. But then you go through, we still have to decide. And I don't know if we decide as far as the quarantine, we're following the guidelines. Here are the rules, quote unquote, here are the rules of quarantining. We might change the rule of masks, but that doesn't change the rule of quarantining. And then you got to then go all the way back to what's best for students and keeping students in school 5 days a week, which we think, bottom line is what's best for students, not what's best for the teachers, and not what's best for the parents, not what's best for, it's what's best for the students. Okay, if you sit in this seat and everything comes down to what's best for students, what you think you're doing is best for students, then I can go to sleep at night. So it comes down to what's best for students. So we have to work through this, and we can't do this. I don't think it's a grand idea to do any of this when, in 15 or 20 minutes and think that we're going to do this correctly. And when we just heard these people speak and they're passionate about it and they have good points, and I wrote down a lot of it, and there are people sitting at home right now that are just as passionate and that I hear from, on both sides. So I don't think, I always, when I write these notes, I sit back for 24 hours before I even.
You are the 24-hour guy.
And to write my notes to respond, how do I think this? How do I digest this and stuff like that? So I really do everyone needs to understand that this isn't just as easy as, we're just going to we decide we do like masks, we don't like masks. And then the October, was it 13th?
Mm-hmm.
The October 13th, you seem to have a clear, can you explain that? And are we 100% sure that come October 13th, this is going to be how it's enforced, 100%? Or
It's the
this is how
reverse.
So, yeah.
It expires. The current legislation expires October 13th.
Okay,
So it's kind of the
explain-
reverse. It's
okay.
already in place.
All right,
Vanessa can
so,
tell you
yeah,
it's
explain to me so make sure I understand as
Right,
best
so,
you know.
how you
House Bill 244,
Mhm.
that's been signed into law, indicates that on October 13th, that a school district cannot treat a vaccinated person or an unvaccinated person differently. Therefore, on October 13th, either we would have to require everybody, vaccinated or not, at all grade levels to wear masks, or we would have to require none, meaning that there would be no requirement, because we can't set a requirement for a group of individuals and treat them differently based off of vaccination status. So on October 13th, the board's going to need, or
It
either decide that
only
it's their
addresses
decision.
vaccination status.
But it could
doesn't-
still be
doesn't
optional,
affect-
yes.
It doesn't affect anything else, just it's a law specifically about vaccinations.
That's
nothing
as
else.
long as the vaccine stays in emergency use authorization as well. If a vaccine has become completely approved by the FDA and the biologics license application has been approved. So House Bill 244 specifically speaks to while a vaccine is in EUA status.
You just like to use that acronym.
It's just,
You do.
it's a
So
distinction.
that was my next question. It was, so, I mean, would schools not be required to require any vaccinations whatsoever?
We already require vaccinations.
That's what I thought. And if a child has or hasn't, we just treat them the same, correct, currently?
We have religious exemptions in place, for example, for vaccinations, but there are, MMR, diphtheria, pertussis. My son's a senior. He had to take a meningitis vaccine to be able to start his senior year. So we would have to make a decision if these were the types of things. Now, again, while it's in EUA status, that's kind of the no-go. But if the COVID vaccine at some point gets fully approved, which it is for 16 and up, that's the question is, does it get added to the list? Is that decision made for us? I mean.
And legally, because it's out of EUA status, I'm going to use your favorite acronym, we can legally require a vaccine for anybody 16 and up in our buildings, students and staff. We could legally, not that we are going to make that's, something we are or are not considering. But I think, Keith, for me, in my little simple mind, October 13th is the date, given the current legislation or whatever expires on, is that we have to treat all students and staff the same way, regardless of their vaccination status, whatever. And so it's either on the mask issue, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, on October 13th, we have to say masks are required for everybody or masks are optional for everybody, right? Is that kind of a simplistic, did I interpret that simplistically correctly?
I would want to ask, because if you're saying that masks are required K6, but you don't say vaccinated versus unvaccinated, as opposed to, do you have the right to enforce it at a particular grade level? Some schools are interpreting that you can't treat them differently, as we didn't. We said everybody in grades blah through blah wears a mask.
Right. But we won't be able to do that.
We could probably choose not to. That's correct.
I guess if I could, are you done? I didn't mean to.
So so that would also then apply to quarantine. We couldn't treat a person who had been vaccinated different to someone who's unvaccinated on whether or not they need to be quarantined.
No, there are actually other rules and laws that would make that enforceable. So basically what it's saying is you can't come up with a preventive strategy or policy that treats one different than the other solely based on a vaccine that's still not fully approved.
So you can see the map, it is more than just about mask versus no mask.
And that's
There's
where
a
I
lot
was,
of things that come into play.
and that's where I was going to go.
Address this.
Just the title of the policy is not just about protective facial coverings. So at a super high level, well, at a higher level, because I'm even going to go even higher, at one level, we need to, if we're going to address other issues in the policy, we might want to consider changing the word of the title of the policy. For instance, we talk about visitors to the, that's not a good example. There's a line in here and I've closed it out. But, so that's one issue. But at a higher level, it becomes conversations that we were having a year plus ago regarding the flexible learning plan 2.0. And for me, the higher level conversations are multiple topics, but not the least of which is who's involved in the conversation and who pulls the trigger on the decision. Whether it's masks, whether it's virtual, hybrid, remote instruction, whether it's, XYZ, myriad of closing one building over another because of an outbreak. So I think we also need to address at a high level, because we don't know what the future is going to hold, who's involved in the conversation and who pulls the trigger. Now, I know you, and I know you, and I know how this district, we all do know how this district runs. and there's never a decision that's made in a silo. So while one individual or one entity may make a decision, it does not mean that conversation hasn't occurred at multiple layers from multiple stakeholders, including the community. So because we're never going to please all the people all the time, I would hope, because I've seen it happen on many, many other items that come to us on an agenda, that the decision that is made is one that collectively, maybe not unanimously, but collectively, that a majority believes in. Now, so that's kind of what I wanted to say, that it's not, as you said, Chris, it's not just about masks. It's about the bigger, what do we do on October 13th? When do we pull, if we pull the trigger on hybrid or remote instruction? Do we, and don't faint, Brian, but do we, if we move to a mask optional environment, do we reopen VLA enrollment, as Reynoldsburg is doing, to allow those parents to enroll their children in an online instructional environment because they don't feel comfortable in sending them into, say, right now in elementary or middle school where masks are mandated. So, and on and on and on. But the super high issue is who's going to pull the trigger. And we have lots of policy that goes like this, or this. Or
And Kathy,
whatever.
go ahead, Lori.
That I said, I think that's basically what we're asking. And does the board want to muddle through this most immediately, or do we just want a higher level resolution?
I personally would be fine with rescinding this policy completely and coming with resolution that is clear what we're doing October 13th. For me, that would be until there is some other change with FDA approvals or whatever else, that would be optional.
So we could work on, in the next 2 weeks, 2 resolutions. And we could also make sure that there are mechanisms in place for the true on-the-spot decision, maybe by a specific building that's a hot spot, or something, like that Keith talked about, but putting together a resolution that, one's one way and one's the other way.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that because I know that there's been a discussion about, we've got a building, there's an outbreak. Okay, now would this prohibit us, there's an outbreak, because I know this is going to be unpopular, I know it is, but I know there's a bunch of people who've come up here and said, well, this thing and nanoparticles do this and this, that, and the other. The overwhelming statistical data is that masks help defer the virus. That's just overwhelming. It's the most researched most researched vaccine ever. But I'm not saying there are side effects that might be bad that we don't know about yet. That could be. I'm just saying, and I don't know how effective it is. No one can say how, but to say it isn't effective is just not meeting the agenda. But my question is so if there is a school that has an outbreak and we're optional at that point in time, would that totally prohibit us from being able to say, okay, for this school, for the next 2 weeks until we can get this under control, we can wear masks?
I think that you build that into the resolution, and that's kind of what I was alluding to, that if there is, if you go one way with masks optional, if that's what the choice is, but you want to be able to turn on a dime for Violet Elementary because, they have 25 staff quarantining and, can't get subs for all of them. And we've got all these kids out, that we should have something in the resolution that gives Chris the ability to immediately turn on a dime and make a decision without trying.
Or even if it's to close a school for a week or what.
And Keith,
But and all that makes sense, okay? And I'm right on board with you. then all of a sudden I started thinking, how do you write that?
Keith, I will tell you this.
Could you say,
Like they wrote this
because you
very
say a
vaguely.
district-wide decision, well, is it, if I say I'm closing Pickerington Elementary and keeping the rest of the schools open, is that a district-wide decision? Because it affect all those schools. I decided to keep all these open and just close this one. It sounds like it's just that one building decision, but there are someone who could walk right up there to that thing and say, oh, no, that was a district-wide position because you chose to keep these other schools open while, so my kid who's a middle schooler is going to school with that elementary. You see what I'm saying?
And Keith, we need to probably make sure
how
we
do you write
wordsmith
that?
that the right way, but I will tell you this, I will stick to our flexible learning 2.0 plan, because we have our plan is very clear when it comes to following very strict protocols and criteria when we're closing schools or going to hybrid model or going to all virtual model. We spend a lot of time on developing that plan and we stick to it. And so there is some language in there that we can use as part of that resolution about what that looks like, because we know, and I'll piggyback on what Vanessa said too earlier. I have conversations with superintendents around 270 almost on a weekly basis, and we're all over the place.
Yeah.
Everybody feels differently about this. There's districts that have strict mandates when it comes to mask, whether it's board resolution or whether it's the superintendent making the decision. We see more and more districts going more to a stricter mask mandate right now. And so we are kind of all over the place. And one of the things I will say is this, whatever language we put in a resolution, we've got to have some flexibility. I don't know what October 13th is going to look like. I don't think any of us do. There's a lot of things that have changed even over the last 2 weeks when you look at the cases that involved our pediatric students. And so there's just a lot of things that are moving pieces right now that we made this decision 2 years ago in March. On a Thursday, the governor said, we're closing schools, and we were in business on Monday. We were up and running. And that's a credit to Brian and to his group with the VLA. It's a credit to our staff, our administrators. We had 10,600 students learning on a Monday when we were told to switch on a Thursday. And I hate the word pivot, but we're going to have to, I always think of Friends every time I think of pivot.
It's a couch.
But we have to be ready to pivot and
Yeah,
make
we
some tough decisions, whether it's a board decision or whether it's a superintendent's decision, because this is not trending in the right direction right now. And I want us to be prepared as a board to make sure, and as an administrative team, that we're ready to make those tough decisions. And to your point, Keith, we can look throughout our district right now, and we do have schools that have higher cases than others. And we have to keep an eye on that and see where our hotspots are and make that determination. And I'll be quite frank and honest, it's going to come down to staffing. We are going to come to a point where, and some districts are doing this already. Transportation, staffing, food service, maintenance, teaching. We're going to have troubles filling positions, and that's going to drive our decisions more so than mask or no mask or cases. I mean, it really is. It's going to come down to whether we can staff our buildings.
Or drive our buses.
Correct.
Now, going back to being a devil, I know I'm purposely trying to be a devil's advocate here for different sides of this and stuff. Let's say we decide, oh, it seems great, we'll have a board and we'll vote. So now all of a sudden there's this same scenario, you got an outbreak and stuff like that. If I understand correctly, then we have to get a hold of board members, find out what our schedules are and stuff like that. I'm gone on vacation, this is happening. I'm on vacation, I can't meet for a week. I know you can have a quorum, but it seems like if it's a district-wide thing, you'd want all the board members there. You have to give 24-hour notice before you can hold all that, and then you'd have to do all that before you hold this, Is that correct?
I think, Keith, we would have to treat it like a calamity day where I make the decision based on the information I have in front of me. I'm not trying to say this will drive the policy, but I think if we don't have that kind of flexibility where we can make that decision on a day's notice, just like I do when I get up at 4:30 in the morning on a snow day, and we reevaluate whether it's safe for our kids to come to school or not, and we make that call. If we had to do that and contact every board member to make that decision, that would be problematic.
Yeah, we've had a couple calamities that were non-COVID related in this district over the years, and they weren't board decisions. We had to close, even closing a building for whooping cough. I mean, Ridgeview
Water
was
main
closed
breaks.
for
Lack
whooping
of-
cough
yeah.
several years ago. We've closed Harmon for a water main break. I
Yep,
mean,
yep, yep.
we do have to build into that resolution the ability for you to, in a true calamity, is what we'll call it. That'll be a good word to use in there because that is a good descriptor of a calamity that happens on spur of the moment.
But
You gotta
it
decide.
it sounds like you're talking though about closing buildings, not about masking students.
Maybe it's either. Maybe it's closing, maybe it's, who knows?
Well, and that's kind of where I'm at, which is the higher level, who
Yeah.
pulls the trigger?
Well-
On any of this, on
Yep.
any of the items in the 73 page, 89, I can't remember how many pages, the flexible learning plan, who pulls the trigger? And again, none of these decisions are made in a silo, even closing school for snow, they're not made in a silo.
Right.
So I think we need to come to a consensus, because I don't think it'll be unanimous, about the broader issue of how to make decisions as it relates to a pandemic, or what was that other word of the policy?
Epidemic.
Pandemic or an epidemic.
Kathy, to your point, I'll say this, and Lori and Clay can attest to this. We had that discussion about communication and collaboration as being part of the language of the new policy, and not just the superintendent making that decision, but what does that look like before we make that decision? And I think from what I hear, that's obviously a step that we've been missing, is having some communication and collaboration with the board. Not that we have to, obviously we want everybody to be informed. It's just, you're right, who makes that decision and when? And to your point too, Vanessa, about being mask versus no mask. I mean, the other part of this resolution is if we do have a hotspot, like a Tucson or a Violet or a elementary building, can we require a mask for students until we get it under control?
Yeah, that was my first question.
That's another great point, because I don't know. I mean, that's a decision we would have to make. I know we currently have a
We
mandate.
can make it.
Well, that's just it. That's
Somebody
after
else may make
October.
that decision after October 13th.
That's
and
correct.
say You can't do it.
That's correct.
Well, and I don't want us to get all hung up about the fact that the policy can be confusing from paragraph, I mean, we have hundreds of policies that if you pick them apart, you could point to a line item that says the superintendent shall, and then can point to another line item that says the Board of Education will. And so there is, so I don't think this is the only policy that needs some help language-wise, but in any event.
It's just pretty bad.
Oh, it's not great. It's not great.
That's why we're asking if we go back and maybe the resolution route for the next meeting and
Lori, what kind of time frame are we looking at for the resolutions, like the next meeting?
Yes.
yeah, that would be in 2 weeks.
'Cause it would
It's the
have to be
only
pretty
meeting
quick.
Before the 13th, except the 11th, which is right that week, so.
And I guess too, since you guys are meeting on this, my personal opinion is we received some information from legal counsel about the exemptions and what is an exemption that is legally listed, noted, identified, and ones that aren't. And I'm a big believer in just following the law and not over-interpreting the law. So, I mean, as you discussed, that's kind of my input on that
And my thought
exemption
was that,
conversation.
my thought was that when we get to that part on a resolution, it's probably just going to mention the fact that guidelines for exemptions such as medical or religious need to be established. I mean, that may be the only piece of a resolution that we actually have.
Established by whom? The law or
Well,
us?
By us, because again, they're not very clear in the policy. So a resolution is going to give us a direction. Where do we go now? And
Yeah.
who's going to define what that is? Then we can take the resolution, once we know where everyone here is, and go back and try to redefine it in that policy, or take pieces and parts. Maybe Neola has something better now, but I don't think they do. And try to go from there. That was, I think, the least intrusive route to take with the information we have right now.
And Vanessa, I think to your point too, what you said earlier, it's similar. This is such a unique policy because Neola can't even really give us a straight answer. And that's their specialty, obviously, is trying to define what policies actually stand for. And when you ask them the same question on this, they don't know. Or I'm not blaming them, it's just
Mm-mm.
we're in the middle of a pandemic.
The whole
and they
country's
don't
dealing
have a
with this
lot
right
of
now. Yeah.
answers to make what this is going to look like. So I think that's a good approach. I don't know how the board feels, but I agree with Keith too earlier that, this is good discussion. I don't think it's something that you're going to be able to draw up and mandate tonight, but it is worth a discussion and bring back and see where we stand as a board.
I think I think we've established that the policy that, as it's written right now, doesn't suit us. So that's why I would just be in favor of rescinding it completely. I don't know that we can write a policy that addresses every scenario that we may have in this situation or in a future one. So I think that we should, again, I think it should be a board decision. I am more than interested in always hearing what your recommendation is. If that gives you the ability to implement something in an emergency situation with it being ratified by the board for consideration shortly thereafter, I'm in favor of that. But I think that we know that the community as a whole doesn't agree on this topic. So I don't think you could expect the five of us who represents the community to be in unanimous vote on this as well. So again, I'm just one of the five, but that's what I would like to see us do next time, is at least just throw this one out. And what's our recommendation going to be and vote on that?
Can I ask that we not rescind this until we have another one to replace it? Because that just kind of throws out everything, but that
Well, I guess
once,
I'm thinking what you're bringing is the replacing.
and see, a resolution isn't as specific as a policy. That's the only thing. The resolution should define who's going to make the decision, what has to be established, and basically say, here's where we need to go. Then I think we will know whether the board believes that the board has to make this decision and the superintendent makes this decision. Then we can rewrite the policy, actually probably very quickly, once we know what people want us to do, because we just don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a little dangerous to rescind a policy if we're going to ultimately replace it with another. Now, we have rescinded policies in the past because they're obsolete or whatever.
Yes.
But I'm a
We usually
little
rescind
leery
them.
about rescinding this before
Usually
we
rescind them after we approve another one.
replace it, yeah.
And Neola will tell you that there are a lot of their clients who didn't even adopt this. Lancaster doesn't have this in place at all, and they're addressing it by resolutions and recommendations. And so they're just looking at each specific scenario and coming up with a plan. Some of those are until something changes. Some of those are for a time period.
They
But
just
they're-
passed last night, actually,
Yeah.
a resolution. I don't know if it was a board resolution or superintendent recommendation, but they did a mask mandate. I don't know.
K
I was gonna
12.
say, we don't want to get to where Lancaster is. It's Lancaster, yeah, no.
It was a K-12.
I don't know if it's K-12. I
Oh,
just know they
okay.
have a mandate in place now.
I mean,
think it's
Hilliard went
K8.
K-12, right?
Yeah, I don't know
K6
about
or K8.
that. I just know that the current status of Lancaster is not a place where we want to be.
Meaning what?
They have full entire classrooms that are at home and stuff.
Bloom Carroll has gone through that already as well.
Yeah, it's Lancaster's, they've got a number, and then you get 1/3, one of 4 first grade classes that aren't going to be in the building for a week and a half.
Yeah, I
So
know.
what do
It's
you
awful.
do? How do you teach the other ones? A teacher sitting in her classroom with nothing to do because she has no one to teach. And they've, in one elementary school, they've decided, well, no, we don't have the people. We're just not going to bus kids there.
It's
It's
just.
if you can't get your kid here, then we're not going to educate them.
I said to somebody, my husband in particular, that our decisions a year ago, which seemed like climbing the mountain, now seems super easy because we didn't know what we didn't know a year ago. We know more, not everything now, but I just feel like we're operating so much more in the gray right now but in any event, it's whatever.
So this is, I mean, I know in our policy meeting, one thing that didn't like about our current policy that I brought up was the fact that if the majority of the board feels that this is Chris's decision, that's fine. I mean, that's the will of the board. However, there has to be an opportunity for individuals to voice their concerns or their ability to speak about their personal opinions in regards to that decision. And Lori can attest to it, Chris can attest to it, Ryan can attest to it. I really struggled with that in the meeting because I don't know how you write that. And I don't know what the forum is, because if a decision's already been made, then what do we do at that point? I mean, yes, someone can come out and say that they're opposed to that decision or they're in favor of it, but if the decision's already been made, then we struggle with exactly putting that in writing and letting individuals in the public or our families or students know whatever our personal opinions were based on that decision. And so I don't know what the proper forum is for that. And I've struggled with that. I've been thinking about it ever since our meeting, of what that forum might look like in people that may not be on either side of the decision and being able to voice their concerns with the move that the district's made.
We may just have to brainstorm the emergency or calamity scenario versus the general
Decision.
say, say we're in June and we're making a decision for August, then obviously there's time that it would need to be brought to a public board meeting or something maybe for discussion. I don't know. We're brainstorming at this point.
Sure, right.
A way to be
And
able to
even to something
communicate
to,
best.
like you were saying about this law, I mean, it could be where Chris can make an option, not saying the option, but an option could be, it rides in the district office. And then if we don't agree with it, just like that, we can override it.
Board always has that option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That we just, if we bring it to the next board meeting, so whatever it would be in effect for a maximum of 2 weeks. And, if it's something that we really thought that was egregious, that you've really overstepped your bounds and at that point in time, I mean, we have that ability to do that.
Yeah, I guess I struggle with Chris's ultimate rights and responsibilities as the superintendent of the district and his management thereof. And I'm speaking out loud. In general, I struggle with that issue balanced with where does the board have the right and responsibility to step in and speak to or specifically vote on a management issue. And it's a balance. It's a balance in 100 different areas of any district. So this is the topic du jour. And I have wrestled with that all along. And I know that there's no right answer because districts across the country are doing things differently. So there's not one right or wrong way. I'm hesitant in stepping too far into that management role. And I don't know where that line is. But to Keith's point, again, these decisions are not made in a vacuum. And I feel, Clay, that we have multiple opportunities to share our points and opinions with Chris or Ryan or the executive cabinet or what have you on this and any other topic. So, and the community obviously knows how to reach us. And so I don't necessarily struggle with the fact that we don't have other opportunities to speak into the process. I personally struggle in where is the line between a management decision and a board oversight decision, for lack of a better word. So I don't know. It's just That's where I'm at. Oh, I got a clap out of it. So,
And the struggle is real.
oh, it is real.
This
And,
is where we're at right
you
now.
know, if it's not this, it's going to be something in the athletic world, or it's something in the academic world, or whatever.
Well, and I'll just say this, Kathy, I think all of us, when we started in this pandemic, all of us were at the table. And there's no doubt all of us were together making decisions. And I don't think it was just the superintendent or the board or the community. All of us were put in a situation none of us had planned or prepared for or trained for. And I think that's where Board of Educations and administrators and everybody's still struggling is you're exactly right. We're still in a pandemic and we're still trying to make decisions and trying not to make them in silos. And obviously we have a very passionate community about, you know, a topic that we have in front of us. And we got a very passionate group that's not here as well. And that's the challenge for all of us. And so I'm looking at this policy thinking, you're right, we don't make decisions. Just, I would hope that I wouldn't make a decision without communicating and collaborating with the five of you or with Ryan or with our administrative team and making educational decisions. And so I can just say honestly, we've done the best we can with the information we have in front of us. And this policy is important. And regardless of which direction we go, you know, there are districts that where, like I said before, boards are making the decision, the superintendent's making the decision. I personally don't have a preference who makes the decision. I have a bigger preference on the outcome of that decision.
Yeah.
That's where I stand. So, thank you.
So Clay, can you kind of tell me what the game plan is? So I'm clear.
It's as clear as mud.
So I believe what I heard is, well, so I believe what I heard was we need to have two resolutions prepared for a board vote. One, to determine where we go forward from here with our masking policy, as well as incorporating language. Well, I guess they need to be on both sides of that. So the masking policy, as well as our, I mean, I guess for lack of a better word, our calamity decisions, those decisions that would have to be made in a quick pace, and incorporate both of those into two resolutions for the next meeting for the board to vote on and go forward from there. I mean, that's sort of what I heard.
Do you mean two resolutions, one that is parent choice and one that is not, but both of them include the emergency type situation? Or do you mean actually four resolutions?
Well, that's
One
what I
about
first started going to was
4 and 4
was
or-
four resolutions, and then
Okay.
I just thought maybe that's just too much to bring back. So I guess what I didn't necessarily hear from anyone is in those emergency situations that there should be some decision without a board action in those emergency situations. If I misheard that, then let me know, but I didn't hear that. So my thought was we bring two resolutions back, one with the masking, or both with masking policy, either no masks or voluntary masks, I guess I should say, or masks optional, or a mandated mask policy, and then both with calamity language. Because I didn't hear anyone say that shouldn't be on the table.
I guess the question is, how do you define calamity and emergency?
Well, that's
I
something
mean,
that
we
we're
gotta
going
be
to have
really
to
clear.
push through at the drafting of the resolutions.
And are we just going to address masks, or are we going to address?
I think it's a bigger decision that everyone has brought up. It's the pandemic period and how
I'm with
we
you.
deliver instruction. Basically, we're down to who ultimately does this.
Right.
Is it Chris, and when? Always? part of the time, or what requires a board vote? That's really, in a nutshell, to me, what everybody is talking about.
So,
yeah.
so then do we want to bring back two resolutions that indicate that basic general policy, because that is a board responsibility, a general policy in the resolution, those decisions should be made by the board. And those emergency decisions are also made by the board? Or do we want to bring back resolutions that say Chris makes all those decisions? If we're talking globally, I'm just trying to fit, I mean, if we don't want to talk about one specific subject such as mask, if we're talking about global policy, then do we want to move forward with just that, global policy? The board is responsible for these decisions. Superintendent and administration is in charge of these decisions.
Basically, the title could be decision-making process in a pandemic. That could be basically
Yeah.
somewhat the title of a resolution, if you have one, we don't, because that's really what this is defining. The decision-making process in a pandemic. And we're going to have.
And in a perfect world, Clay, I like what you said. The board makes decisions regarding policy. These are Kathy's words. Board makes decisions regarding policy. The superintendent and the administrative leadership team make decisions about day-to-day management. But those are Kathy's words. I don't know how, you have to fluff it up in a resolution, but, and I know, again, not everybody agrees with me, but I do like that first example that you referenced.
But I mean, I think that's sort of what I
Yeah.
heard. I mean, if we're not going to focus on one specific dynamic of this pandemic, then I think we need to be, as Neola is, very general. And if we're going to go out in that branch, then we're going to have to make some decisions about how we handle things in a wider spectrum of policy versus the day-to-day decision-making.
Yeah, I think that as we've talked this through more, I think that we should actually address one piece separately, the pandemic, but I think it should be a little bit farther than that. I think it should be a pandemic or natural disaster. And we've had multiple situations where we've had an entire school flood or something of that situation. I think that we need to give our superintendent the ability to take action quickly. But I think that where we know it's going to be greater than a day or those time periods, we do need to ratify and meet and have these discussions amongst the board as to what that looks like and what are we going to continue to do. Not that we kind of lose that insight or that input. And so I think, Clay, when you're talking about where can we have those discussions and give that input, I think our community as a whole needs to hear that input. And so I think this is the place where we do it. I absolutely agree that Chris needs the ability to shut a school down if it's not safe or multiple different for reasons other than just even a pandemic. But I still think it needs to be ratified by the board if it's going to be for extended periods of time.
I think that's fair. Okay. Does anyone else have an opinion about adding that decision-making into a natural disaster, what that might look like? I just searched our policies and the only thing that came up when I searched natural disaster was homeless students.
Well, we have calamity, and that word is
Right,
calamity that we've talked about already with this, which would include any natural disaster. That's a calamity.
Sure.
So if we try to use the word calamity in the general term, epidemic, pandemic, calamity.
Yeah, I think when I saw that as well. When I looked at calamity, it seemed like it was a day incident. It didn't seem like it was potentially a long-term situation for a building or groups of buildings.
That's correct.
We'll work on it. Because whatever we do with that, we'll use as a basis for whatever the policy is going forward. So that would be really super good. to
Yeah, I
have that
appreciate
insight.
this. This is not easy, but it was really healthy, I think.
All right.
Okay, so
And I just want to end it with one thing. Chris, clearly, we know I didn't agree, but I still stand by, I know you did it because you're trying to do what's best for our kids, and I appreciate that.
I know you do. Thank you.
Okay, so still the two resolutions coming back?
Unless as you, whoever the you is, works on these, you think of something we're not thinking about tonight. I mean,
Okay.
that's just.
And the 15 emails that you're going to get before we get out of this room.
Sure, understood.
You've already gotten a couple, kids.
Yeah, understood. Okay. Next section is section G for information only. We have 8 Pickerington High School Central staff members and 26 students going to the Sunnyside Up Peer Leadership Group. That's at Camp Otterbein in Logan, and that's September 26th through the 28th. We have the North High School softball team traveling to Cocoa Beach,
All right.
March 22nd through the 27th of 22.
That's spring break, right?
It is.
Okay.
That is a booster sponsored trip. We have another trip by the North High School softball team going to Willowwood, Ohio, April 15th and 16th of 22 for the Thunder softball showcase. No PLSD funds are being used for that. That is also a booster sponsored trip. The Pickerington High School Central Girls Lacrosse team will be traveling to Tennessee, March 24th through the 26th of 22. That is a booster sponsored trip and no PLSD funds are being used. And finally, the Pickerington High School robotics team will attend VEX robotics competition October 28th through the 31st, 2021. That is in Tennessee as well, and that is going to be paid by CTE funds.
Clay, I have a question.
Yes.
Chris, can we get a presentation on the Sunnyside Up Club? I just wanted to understand more about what the focus of that group is, how students apply, what their selection process is for it. And I'd also like to know, what the group particularly has accomplished over the years.
Would you like them to do a presentation at the board meeting, or
I
would you
would.
just want information?
I feel like I
Okay.
don't know enough about that.
All right.
Look, I think this comes up every time that we see dates that are during the school week. And organizations that take kids out of school. And that's 3 days out of school.
Okay.
So it's just very difficult for us when we want kids in school
Right.
to believe that it's okay to keep pulling them out of school. If it's on the
Absolutely.
weekend, great. If it's Friday afternoon, we're leaving, but it's very, very difficult. And I know many of these are taking kids out of school for multiple days.
We will check.
And that's not the only one.
I guess I have a little bit different take on that. I mean, in general, for me, my own opinion is pulling our kids out of school. We don't have a wild, wild west mentality. We used to, but I am of the opinion that teaching and learning can happen not just in the classroom, but it can happen at events like the Sunnyside Up Retreat. My kid was part of that umpteen years ago, but it's beneficial, I think, for our kids sometimes to get out of the classroom and learn in a different way. And so I don't want to go back to when we're having this group out for a week and then the next, I don't want to, that's not right. But I personally don't have a problem with the Sunnyside thing. But I like Vanessa's suggestion and the fact that we have the Sunnyside Up program at both high schools. Maybe we can make sure that both of those high school advisors are here to present together so we can hear what's going on.
Well, and I know we don't want a presentation. I know Mr. Seymour has a lot of experience with Sunnyside Up. I don't know, Brian, did you lead Sunnyside group when you were in teaching?
Actually the first person to be a student to go, and then a staff member to go as well too. And then I got the opportunity when I was teaching to go 24 times. It is one of the best experiences that a kid can get involved in, and the ramifications of it afterwards is the continuation of the leadership project. So there's also like FACE was a freshman action challenge where they were giving mentorship to build freshmen up. And there are other activities that go on throughout the course of the school year that we utilize those significant students. They're brought in by staff member and former Sunny Side Up nominations. And then basically it's 2.5 days at camp. Void of technology, which is weird coming from me. But in addition to that, it's really a lot of, it's a different sense of learning, like Kathy said. It's not an academic piece, there's a lot more to it. I'm happy to bring those.
And I just really want to understand more about it. I've known some kids that were in it. I've known other kids that I go, well, why wouldn't they be in it? But I'm wanting to understand really what it does and how it benefits us. And if it's really as great as it sounds, then why don't we have more people in it? But I just really want to have a better understanding of it.
Yeah, and it has nothing to do with not understanding the value of the program. We made a conscious effort with outdoor education to bring that back somehow to where kids weren't out of school. So for me, maybe there is something else out there, because my question is, do we ever look to see if there's another way to deliver it out there? Or is this the only way? So.
It used to be 3 days of school, and now I'm not sure they're just doing it the same way, but we started on Sunday now, so it's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
This is 3 days of, yeah, this is 3 days of school. These dates here are, it's the middle of the week.
She's handled it for years. She's one who started it over at North, and it's changed hands a couple times over at Central, so I'll be more than happy to figure that out. Get that work collaboratively on that.
And I would say this about any, it's not,
Oh, yeah.
not
Absolutely.
targeting that. I would say this about any group that is taking kids out of school for 3 days. It's.
Thanks.
Next section is, or I'm sorry, the next topic under information only is the plan for progress.
Yeah, board members, Ryan and I continue to work with our executive cabinet and looking at what we call work in progress plans. Part of that is some of the discussion we had this evening when we talk about enrollment numbers. We talk about our plan, what that's going to look like moving forward. We have, our enrollment is up compared to what we thought it would be. And I anticipate, I know Ryan has looked at the numbers too, but I think that's going to continue. You look at the growth in our community, you look at the challenges we're going to face, that's going to continue to be the work of our plan for progress, is addressing some of those challenges. We are not on the ballot in November, so we know we have a full year ahead of us where we're going to have to address some issues when it comes to our enrollment. Brian has done a good job with the VLA, continues to do a good job with that. We have some families that are taking full advantage of that opportunity, and I commend them for doing that, because we know that every child learns differently, and having that opportunity to learn virtually works for some kids. It just doesn't work for all. And so I think the other challenge that we're facing right now, quite honestly, is there is a big difference between being in the hybrid model and being an all-in model. And we're experiencing that firsthand in our buildings. When it was hybrid, we were able to manage the numbers in the buildings a little easier, resources as well, when we come to food service and transportation and all those things that we really didn't anticipate being an issue. This school year is now an issue. And a lot of that has to do with our students being in session all in. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I think it's a great model. I think it's what we need to do for our kids, and keeping them in school is going to be the big challenge. But with our plan for progress too, I'm excited to announce that we're going to have some academic presentations to the board starting in October. Is that right, Ms. Gillison? Starting in October. I think it's time for us to refocus a little bit. We had a lot of discussions of things outside of academics. But I think it's time for us to refocus as a board and as a leadership team on what we're really about, which is educating children. And the teaching and learning piece is important. And so I'm excited. Ms. Gillison is our Chief Academic Officer, is going to be leading those presentations. So hopefully a lot of our discussions will focus around that moving forward in the future. And we have a lot of things to be proud of in this school district. And we have a lot of things academically that our kids are performing outstanding inside and outside the classroom. And I think it's time for us to tell our story a little bit instead of having other people tell our story. And we have a lot of things that we should be proud of. And I think we are a destination school district. You know, I hear a lot of the concerns. I hear what the community has to say. But at the end of the day, we're all here for the school system. We're here because we believe this is the best place for our kids. And I live in this community as well, and I believe in this school system. 65% of our staff members live in our community, and that speaks volumes. 65% of our staff believe that this is the best place to educate their children. That doesn't happen in a lot of larger other school districts. We're committed to making this, like I said, the best school district possible. And we will have some disagreements, and the Plan for Progress is about that, but it's also about keeping us focused on what's important. And academics and academic excellence is the #1 pillar when it comes to our Plan for Progress. And the second one is the lean and efficient operations. And the third is modern facilities. And all three of those things we'll continue to put in front of the board. So I'm excited about that coming in October, because I think it's really going to refocus what we're about. And with Alicia's leadership and the Department of Teaching and Learning, I think we're going to see some exciting things. So I appreciate that opportunity. I don't have any really specifics with the Plan for Progress tonight, Ryan. I don't know if you want to touch base on anything while we're here, or?
I just wanted to add that we're working with Cooperative Strategies, and we're beginning to download and actually send to them our data files for the 1920 and 2021 school year. That's one of the things I'm going to get done by Friday of this week. Vince and Heather have continued to work with SHP, and we're hopeful within the next 7 to 10 days that we'll have a concept of what our capacities are at each building. I know someone might say, well, you know, how could you not understand what that number is? We're doing everything we can to make sure that we squeeze out all available spaces, but yet at the same time realize that no physical space is infinite. So what we're probably going to come back with, if I can share with you, if you feel like this is on target, we're going to come back with kind of if we look at, for example, every physical teaching space in a building has X number of students, and then we have other physical teaching spaces that are different or flexible. For example, Vince and I have talked a lot about at a given period at a high school, you know that you physically have students in a classroom up to 32 if you go by our master agreement. But you also, given that it's 4th, 5th, or 6th period throughout the day, have a couple hundred, if not 300 students in a cafeteria. If it's the first period, you've got flash out, and so you may have students who aren't even there yet. Or if it's third period, you might have the number of students who are physically in a teaching space, but 150 kids who are sitting in a study hall. So what we're going to try to do is formulate a capacity, and I know we're trying as hard as we can, Mrs. Niekamp, to provide a hard and fast, we think that the number is X. But the way we're going to try to go about it is more of if every available teaching space, and certain teaching spaces might have capacities based on what that particular space is used for, had this many kids versus this many kids versus this many kids. We then have to decide, I guess, collectively, do we really want every physical teaching space at a high school to have 32 kids, every single one? And at the same time, a study hall could have as many as 150 kids in it. Those are the types of decisions that we need some feedback on, because you could say, hey, when we get to 30, who are we kidding? That's insane. And that's going to be so packed that it's not going to be able to function. The lower you go in K6, the more it boils down to at any given point in time, you know how many physical teaching spaces you have. You know how many kids you have. How full do you want to be? 28 or 30? By master agreement, we call it the soft cap at 28. We have the hard cap at 30. So that's what we're going to try to provide. And we believe we're in pretty good shape, K-6. What we're trying to do now is to be sure that we've analyzed all of what are the spaces at a high school level that are varying levels of, okay, this period you might have a study hall that has 110 kids in it, but next period, that particular study hall might not have kids in it. So we don't have an exact science, but we're working closely with our architect to try to look at things like that. Does that seem like that's headed down the right path, or does that seem difficult?
I think it put a lot more into it than what I originally thought. I originally thought that this space is designed, can have a capacity of a certain number of souls.
We're trying that.
And I think you're trying to look at it based off of its use more so than just its physical space, right? And how many people can get out of here safely at any given time. So that would be very different, I think, than where you're going, which is what is the use of the facility, more so than just how many people can use the facility.
We're trying to do both, and I guess what I'm saying is we can provide and will be able to provide a number that would just simply take every available teaching space times 26, 28, 30, 32, whatever that is. We can do that. We could even take these other spaces that you're talking about where we're trying to analyze use and say, well, the capacity of this space is X. We'll have that number. But what we're also trying to do is to come up with something closer to reality, which is at any given point in time, you might have a couple 100 to 300 students in flux at a high school level because they're not even scheduled that period. So does that mean during that period that they still have to have, I guess you could look at it one of two ways. Well, if all of them were mandated to be in the building at that point in time, we got to know we have enough space for them. Is that what you're feeling is more the number that, okay, fine. There's 1,800 kids in that building right now. There's another 250 hither and yon. But if you had to bring all 250 back in at once because you had no choice, could you?
Yes.
Is that what you want?
Yes.
I think that's helpful.
Okay.
Hither and yon. Southern
Sorry.
Ohio.
Okay,
I would
that's
stop the
informative.
work you're doing, because I think it's very valuable, what you're trying to say, and I'm interested in seeing what those, and I think it's hard to ask questions till you see those play out, and say, hey, I don't think you guys are deep into this, and so I feel like probably have a lot more questions or say, hey, this is, because the number one thing I would think you need to be able to do too is create something that's expandable, because, like you said, we're not on, even if we get a bond issue and we get it passed next year, we're looking at 4 years down the road. I mean, this building isn't just going to pop up overnight. So this has to be a workable, it would be good if isn't just, okay, here it is. Okay, now we know this. We need to be able to use this as a tool over the next, next couple years. So it has to have some flexibility about it, or, we need to be able to continue to use it and not have to reinvent the wheel next year and the year after that and the year after that.
I would like to share one thing. And if we approach it more from we have X number of physical spaces and X number of students, and it produces a capacity of X times Y equals Z. I will forewarn you that there's a couple of buildings that we all have carried a concept in our head that there's room for growth, that they're full.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to share. For example, I don't think I'm sharing anything that's highly secretive. If we take that approach, North is too full right now.
Yeah, which this is where we get to what it was built for versus what it's being used for.
Right.
And they're definitely two different numbers.
Yeah, we were shocked, and that's why Vince and I started asking more questions. We were stunned to see that a building that we all would have said, we got 300 kids to go, is too full. So we'll show you that, and then we can have the discussions as to whether we're like, no, that doesn't, that's why I want to share that there is a hard, fast, black and white number. But then there's a reality of what has to happen programmatically. And we just want to be able to share both senses with you. If we say, look, in this particular situation, we're going with a hard, fast number. That's just what it's got to be. That's all we wanted to get across is just a little bit. Vince, am I speaking out of turn that we were a little bit shocked to see that according to that method?
So, those are the things we're talking about, study halls, stuff like that you wouldn't put a class figure.
Yeah.
In the elementaries and middle schools, you can look at the individual room because those are home rooms and they're not changing classes. But once you get to high school and junior high, then you got some spread out stuff.
So we'll try to, this is a Kathy word, mush both of them together to give you what you're looking
Mush.
for. I did.
God love you. Well, and for me, this ties into our conversation about pandemic and epidemic related decisions. Whose decisions are they? Who's the final trigger puller?
Us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for continuing to muddy. So anyway, this is where my thoughts go, which is none of these decisions are going to be made in a vacuum, whether they're masks or hybrid instruction or whatever related to the pandemic, or if it's related to academic instruction and use of facilities. The conversations are ever present amongst the proper layers of folks in the district. Whose ultimate authority is it to pull the trigger?
See, that's what I believe.
So that to me is the super high level where my mind goes, and I want to make sure that we're consistent regardless of the discussion point.
And that's what we're trying to do, I guess, to get, that's a
Yeah,
perfect,
right.
perfect capstone. We're trying to say, if you look at it this way, if you look at it this way, if you look at it this way, and then we decide, how do we want to look at this thing? That's what we're trying to do is we don't want to back into a corner and say, well, this is the capacity clearly. And then have someone say, well, did you consider that? Because that could be a little bit different depending on, X, Y, or Z. That's what we're going to try to provide you. And then we determine that the capacity is this.
Any more discussion about that? All right. Our next section is the COVID-19 update. I know we had a pretty lengthy discussion earlier, so I don't know if there's.
The only thing I have to add is just some numbers. We are at just from September 4th to September 10th, we're at 64 positive cases in the district. We're at 296 total quarantines, and I think that's our biggest challenge right now is the quarantines.
Sure is.
Because that does impact us, whether we have the mask mandate or not. How we quarantine students and staff is determined by that situation. So, and the only other thing I really want to say again and reiterate is that, whether we all agree on this or not, we're all in this together and we all want what's best for our kids. And to me, 5 days a week of school is what's best for our kids. And, we have a difference of opinion sometimes on what that should look like. But at the end of the day, we've got to do what's best to keep our kids in school. And right now we're doing pretty well. I mean, when you look at the actual numbers of cases, we're doing pretty well. The quarantines concern me because they do impact delivery of instruction for a lot of students and staff for that matter. So I am a little concerned. As I mentioned earlier, my other concern with the COVID cases, and this has nothing to do with whether you're vaccinated, unvaccinated, or masked or unmasked, is the actual number of cases that's occurring in children. The Dispatch had an article that came out September 4th. We have 7,127 Ohio children now tested positive for COVID-19. This accounts for 24.4% of all the cases in the state. That's a little concerning and something we need to keep an eye on. And also nationally, that's happening throughout. As of August 22nd, nearly 204,000 cases were reported, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics. The other thing that I've kind of been keeping an eye on is some of the professionals that have been coming out and speaking about being careful about the COVID and also how it's impacting our kids is Dr. Sarah Bode. A lot of us may know Sarah or Dr. Bode, I think is how she says her name. But she is physician and medical director of Nationwide Children's Hospital, Care Connection, School-Based Health and Mobile Units. And she stated that it's not a quick little virus everyone is getting over. We're seeing some kids who are having to be hospitalized and put on ventilators. And she stated that it's a really big, significant disease with months of long recovery for those students. So we have to keep an eye on that as well. Just stating too, I think it was just 2 weeks ago, the CEOs of 65 children's hospitals throughout the country signed a letter calling for everyone, in their opinion, professional opinion, to get vaccinated, mask up and socially distance when necessary. Our own Nationwide Children's Hospital CEO, Tim Robinson, signed that letter as well. And the other piece too, Clay, that we're kind of keeping an eye on and for the board is the actual current state average right now is 582.4 cases per 100,000 residents. Fairfield County right now is at 724.7.
But what's our area at?
Well, that's just it. I mean, I don't have the breakdown for our area,
Oh,
but I
'cause
do have the
usually they
breakdown
give
for
you that.
Fairfield County. And I didn't see the
Get that.
Pickerington number, but
Oh.
I just saw the county. But that's where we're at. The other piece too, I will say this, I know there was a couple speakers on our vaccination, our Panther and Tiger Vax cards. Whether we agree or disagree about incentives for getting vaccinated, we have 150 students who are taking advantage of that. We think that's phenomenal. We think that's an opportunity to keep 150 students of ours in school. And we do not do that without parental consent. We obviously are not vaccinating any students without their parents knowing. The incentive is simply to get students and make students safe and get vaccinated if that's what they want and desire. We're not trying to play parental choice. We're not trying to make the decision for the parents.
Right.
It's simply their decision if they feel like it's that important for them. We just wanted to provide an opportunity for them and give them some incentive to get vaccinated, and we think it's important. Our quarantine numbers show that, and so that's the only reason we decided to do the incentive program. There was no hidden agenda there.
Yep.
So
I apologize for interrupting you. No, I apologize for a minute ago for interrupting. But I have a really difficult time sometime when we display what's going on in, Dublin or Olentangy or whatever. It's like, we just need to know what's going on here. And I know we are in close proximity to some of those areas, but we all also know that Fairfield County is kind of a different animal. The farther, more rural we go.
Yeah.
So,
right.
yeah, sometimes.
But at the end of the day, all 80, how many counties do we have?
88.
88 counties are red. So
yes,
nothing's good right now.
No,
So,
I'm
my
sorry.
subdivision may be better than your subdivision, but I mean, I hear what you're saying, but at the end of the day, no data is really great.
No, and the only reason I bring those numbers up is it's obviously alarming that we have to keep an eye on, and we have to pay attention to what we're facing within our school district. So
Can I
So our total cases for our
Last
zip
2 weeks.
for the last 2 weeks is 286. For the last 2 weeks in our area.
What does that mean? The zip code, by zip code?
That's by zip code. I just pulled it on the Ohio Department of
Okay.
Health.
Yeah, I knew it was, they got.
Is that all
down.
ages?
It just says reported total, it just says
Everyone.
total,
Yeah, okay.
total cases in the past 2 weeks. That's all it says. So I
Which is
don't know what that,
Right at 700 per 100,000.
you're looking at the same thing, the same
Yeah.
dashboard I am.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, when I look at our dashboard, just help me understand. We've got a lot of students quarantined, but absolutely no staff. How is that possible if
It's
they've all
not.
interacted?
that's not true, is it, Christina? I know we have staff.
Partly that's a true statement, this week and last week, I know, I top my head. But, because of the vaccination status or because of, close contact, so if they're masking close contact or vaccination,
Okay.
Could you repeat?
If they were vaccinated or masked, they did not have to quarantine.
Okay, and that's the
Or
same
students, for that
approach.
matter,
Is that the same approach, Christina, we're taking with our students? If they're vaccinated or masked, they do not have to quarantine, or they quarantine for a smaller period of time? Okay.
That's another factor that, plays into it, is either this masking, social distancing, vaccination status, and whether or not they've tested positive in the past 90 days.
Yeah, that's all a part of that modified quarantine, yeah. Was that your?
Yeah.
And I just want to continue on this quarantine topic for just a few minutes. I get that this quarantining approach is a mess. It's a mess for the right reasons. I mean, again, we're all in this for the kids, and everybody's trying to do the right thing and all that. But here's my frustration with the quarantining process, and it really has to do with any sort of infectious disease. It goes to the lag time in the reporting process. By the time we are quarantining students, that quarantining process can really be a waste of time. Not every time. And in all fairness, reporting of a cold or the flu, we've got, you're contagious before symptoms show. So coronavirus, flu, cold, whatever. You can be contagious before symptoms show. But with the particular quarantining protocol and process that we're following, that lag time is almost hypocritical. It just works against what we're trying to do. And I know that we're taking our guidance and leadership from the public health departments. I get that. I'm not kind of pointing fingers at anybody, except maybe them, but even not them, because it's many steps in the process. And by the time we pull the trigger, if these kids are going to get sick, they're going to get sick. Now, that doesn't mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater and say to hell with quarantining, just everybody all in, good luck, cross your fingers. But that is a frustration, I think, that the community has in general, that I don't know if we'll ever have an answer to. There are some counties, Warren in particular, who are trying this little experiment of maybe really reining in this process and making it a little bit more commonsensical, but we don't have the green light apparently to go forth with that. I know you're kind of staying on top of that. So, in general, I think the community is frustrated with the quarantining process because it's confusing, and sometimes we're just quarantining kids or staff who are beyond kind of contamination. I don't know. I'm just kind of rambling because it's just frustrating.
Well,
but we don't really have a control over it.
No, and I'll say this publicly too, Kathy. I think the frustration that we have is we have principals who are frustrated because they have to do the contact tracing.
Yep.
And they're spending a lot of time. They're covering classes because of lack of teachers to cover those classes. And they're spending time with contact tracing. They're dealing with transportation issues. There's a lot of things that, exactly what you said, that's impacting the quarantine. And we're trying to do the right thing and follow the right guidelines. And that's difficult, especially in a building like Ridgeview, for example, where you have almost 1,000 students. And when you look at a quarantine there, talking to Miss Richardson, their principal, Friday night, she's spending 4 to 6 hours trying to work through 4 pages of students and staff that could possibly be quarantined based on
Right.
exposure. And so that's where we're struggling. And that's where we really have to weigh what's the best use of our time. And to your point, whether it's symptomatic or not, we have to follow those guidelines. And
that was a perfect segue to the other point I wanted to bring up, which is the amount of time our staff at all levels, support staff all the way up to building and district office leadership, and even us. We're going to have a 3-hour meeting tonight, and most of it was taken up by this pandemic conversation. But my concern has to do with our staff
And the amount of time that the emphasis or the efforts and responsibilities are being devoted to trying our best to manage this issue within our buildings, whether it's phone calls or letters or angry parents who just don't believe us or won't follow through with our quarantining requirements and expectations. This is ridiculous. I mean, it's ridiculous globally because of how much time some of our staff members are spending on this. The fact that some of our staff members are resigning over this, which includes abuse by the community when we make a simple phone call. And something's got to give here. And I think it's on all ends of the conversation. Some things we can control, but I am very disappointed when I hear stories about verbal abuse from our community to our staff who are simply trying to do what was required of them regarding this virus and getting verbally abused by the community, parents, and coupled with that, staff are like, screw this, I'm out. And they're resigning. So we literally have to come together. We have to, because it's just rough right now. And if we want to continue to be all in, I'm looking at you because I'm just like, if we want to be all in, which we all want for our kids, we got to work together. And sometimes we're just going to have to suck it up when a decision is made that we don't like, whether it's X, Y, or Z. But this verbal abuse that we're getting from the community to our staff, it's the same anger I have about that line item in the consent agenda approving a salt leave for one of our staff members. This is not who we are.
We're good?
Okay. So the next section is section H, comments, questions. First section is for public comments or questions.
You want to clarify what can and can't be?
Sure. So just so everyone is clear, the only topics are the treasurer's report, consent agenda items, discussion action items, or the discussion only items.
That's fine. I'm not sure where this was, but it's pertaining to the changing of the calamity COVID plan.
What was your name, ma'am?
Sorry. My name is Stacy Vega. I reside at 7310 Steeman Road.
Say Vega?
Vega.
Okay.
I am a Christian. I'm not ashamed or embarrassed to say that. I know what beliefs I hold in my heart, but I don't know what any of you believe. I don't know what any of you believe, but I have a real problem when someone comes in here and casts doubts over what their personal set of beliefs are. This country, one of our founding pillars was freedom of religion. And as you guys move forward in changing your policies, resolutions, wording, whatever you do, I ask that you follow the law and are not dictated by somebody's personal opinions or their political agendas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amy Voigt. I reside at 9587 Half Farm Drive. So the Supreme Court actually took the latitude to infringe on religious freedoms away from local school boards. They expanded it to include beliefs that are not theistic in nature, but are sincerely held personal beliefs. So that does fall under the religious exemptions. So that is a decision that the Supreme Court made. So the idea that we can just say, oh, well, we're going to include these religious beliefs, but not these, or somehow evaluate them. The Supreme Court has already said you don't get to pick apart somebody's religious beliefs, and beliefs, sincerely held moral or ethical beliefs, do not have to be theistic in nature in order to be granted the same dignity as theistic ethics and morals. That's all.
Thank you.
Adam Johnson, White Cross Court, 8194. Not COVID related, actually. Want to talk about levy, and I would assume this is in treasurers. That's why I want to make sure this is okay. The estimating model and things like that. I want to say, hey, I appreciate that because that's a difficult thing to do. I do estimating in my job, and especially when you got people moving in and out. I just wanted to give my 2 cents on someone who has always voted no on school levies as to why. I think that's important. If you want to know why I might vote yes, time. Taxes whatever that word's, taxes that go on forever and ever and
Perpetuity.
ever. I'm never going to vote for that, right? And I'm not against taxes. I pay them, and I know that they do great things in the community with police and fire and school, etc. But when it seems like to me, if we have new people coming in, explain to the community how those new residents aren't helping pay for that additional stuff, right? That's part of the confusion there is. And I know that 20 people moving into a neighborhood aren't going to fund a full building, right? We know that. But it seems to me that we need to have something that's like, hey, for the next 10 years, this is what the levy's going to be, right? I might actually vote for that because I know I'm not going to be paying for, 50 years. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, sir.
So that brings up a question. I know that Ryan has a presentation that he made to a group of parents when we went through a reevaluation year at Harmon that was so well received because it was very clear and explained how that works financially. Do we think that it would be time to maybe pull that back out and put it at the top of our financial on the website?
It's been there the entire time.
Yeah.
There's a video
Yeah, we
that explains
back up.
the rollback factors. And as more properties come into the district, the overall tax burden on an individual taxpayer actually decreases over time, because what ends up happening is most folks think that the property values in a community go up, let's say 20%, which they went up 20% in 2019. And that was the initial response we got from a lot of people in the community. There is no way that the school needs 20% more in taxable revenue. And they're exactly right, because we don't get it. What happens is for all voted levies, if you think about Mr. Johnson, the calculation of taxes is the tax rate times the home's value equals taxes. So you got the right-hand side of that equation. If home value goes up, you expect total taxes, the product, to go up. But that is not the case. As total value goes up, tax rates go down. And if you don't believe me, call your county auditor. It happens. That's exactly how it works. Any voted levy does not bring in any more in tax revenue for an existing home than the same year it was voted in. Now, there is a small piece of all of taxable, you got me started. There's a small piece called inside mills. Inside mills are a static, constant total of 10 mills, but not every entity has 10 mills, they share. So Pickerington's share of what's called the 10 inside mills is 4.5, but your county would have a piece of the inside mills, your library, your city. So in essence, when a levy is voted into play, you will know that for time immemorial, and a lot of levies aren't necessarily for a continuing period of time. The bond issue had a maximum maturity of 38 years. I know someone might say, I'll be dead in 38 years, it might as well be forever. But we work, as we have with all of our debt issuances. Imagine when you buy a home, you get a letter of credit from your bank. That letter of credit says you are approved for up to a $450,000 loan. That does not mean that you have to go get a $450,000 loan. In fact, if you're prudent, you're going to get what you can afford. So we tried to state that during the levy that we anticipated being able to pay our levy off as we do all of our debt issuances, and somewhere in the neighborhood of between 25 and 30 years. But the maximum maturity, and that's just a calculation based on the average useful life of the blend of assets that go into a bond issue. But ultimately, yes, a lot of people think that when your values go up, your taxes go up. And that's not dollar for dollar true. In fact, the only portion of your taxes that go up are the small portion that are dedicated to inside mills. Where schools do get more tax dollars are new properties. However, a lot of people think that with all the new building that's going on in Pickerington, that's more than enough to support a, $85 to $90 million bond issue, and it just simply isn't. So anyway.
Ms. McElwain, I'm going to give you the last word.
So I don't know if this is even a question I'm allowed to ask. So I just want to ask you, I just want to ask if I can ask it, I guess. If not, then I'll sit down. I just want to see if you guys can elaborate on this whole coaching principle thing and like say what this coach is going to be doing, and about like, what are they going to be coaching the principals about? Is that something we can talk about?
Well, this was our first,
Time that you've
this
heard
is our
this. Yeah.
first, we're going to be talking about that again at the next meeting, right? Is
I
it,
don't
will it
need you
be
to go into
maybe?
like depth of it,
discussion.
but like, you hired them to coach, so what are we hiring them to coach for? Just a general.
You want to address that?
Yes, I can address.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're hiring them to coach for continuous improvement. If you look at the state report card from 2019, Pickerington, that's good, but we can be great. So they're coaching on continuous improvement, they're coaching on how to cultivate partnerships with families and community. They're coaching on how to set very high standards and expectations. So there is, we evaluate our principals, we evaluate them by the Ohio Principal Evaluation System. And that system has certain standards and rubrics. So to be on those rubrics that our principals want to continue to grow professionally and personally. But more importantly, it's focused on continuous improvement, because that's how we get from where we go.
Okay, so would you consider it CRT?
No.
No.
So if I Google, if I like look up what did you say the name of?
Doug Reeves.
Dr. Doug Reeves.
Yes. If you can look up Doug Reeves.
Well, so it was called.
Creative Leadership Solutions. You can pull them up.
Yeah.
When we look up creative.
It would just be nice to have information.
Yeah, because when we looked up something, it was like, what did it say?
Diversity, equity, inclusion.
Well, I think the bottom line is this. I think we provide support, professional support for a lot of people in our school district, teachers, and a lot of, but where we miss sometimes is our administrators. And that's what we're focusing on, is providing them some professional support so they can be instructional leaders in our building. It really doesn't have anything to do with CRT, has nothing to do with the implementation of anything except the fact that we want to provide our principals an opportunity to have professional development that they've never had before. And, that's the one area when we all became administrators, I think we all could use additional support. Coaching is simply that, coaching, just like our instructional coaches. They go in the buildings, work with the principals, work with the teachers. But our principals really didn't have that go-to support system that other people in our buildings and other people in our district have. So that's really the focus of this work.
Yeah, I just wanted clarification.
Thank you.
Another point to be made too is we've been handpicked. People are picking apart our administration and pulling them to other schools. And
That is
so-
correct.
So part of this is the fact that we have a young administrative staff overall. So we're looking for experience to help them.
Any board members, comments, questions?
That was mine.
Understood.
I'm
I
done.
know you said it before I got a chance
done.
to announce it.
I'm sorry.
but-
See, he jumped the gun tonight.
I just had a quick one that, we all, again, just as everyone out there is very passionate about the education of their children. We're all trying to do the right thing, and we all know that everyone has differing opinions. But as you notice, we're all in the middle of, still in the middle of a pandemic, and we don't always get the best written things because everyone is learning. Everybody is still learning. So we appreciate people that come here, and we hope that you appreciate that we're trying to do the right thing too. So, you know, that's all I really wanted to say. Because sometimes when you come down and speak, you don't really get a response, and it's geared that way because there really isn't an opportunity to interact and answer questions. But under normal circumstances, we're milling around in the evening after this, but tonight we actually have an executive session. But Dr. Briggs, Ryan, anyone of the administrative staff or the board, feel free to pick up the phone or email. Everybody here wants to do the right thing, and we're all in the same boat. So just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that we understand.
Is there a motion and a second to enter executive session per ORC Section 121.22G1, the employment of a public employee, the discipline of a public employee or public official?
Long as it ends by like 8:30.
Oh, my goodness.
You have a ball game to watch?
No.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just that we.
There is a chance that
There
we
is a
will
chance we
return
would
to
come-
open session for further business. Any other comments? Mr. Jenkins, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Niekamp.
Yes.
Mr. Christoph.
Yes.
Mrs. Sanders.
Yes.
Mr. Lopez.
Yes.
Mrs. Olszewski.
Yes.
Yeah. No, when I talk